Hello there, welcome back to the booth here at Mythic Championship VI. That's Paul Chian, I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. And of course, this is what we all play for. This is Sunday here at the Mythic Championship. We've got our top 8, and we're gonna get right into it with our first quarterfinal grouping here. Let's take a look at our matchup for the first one that we're gonna be watching, Paul. It is Eli Kassis versus Oscar Christensen, and both of them, as you can see, in their first top finish together. But make no mistake, these are two veterans of the game. We're not talking about people who are new to Magic here by any stretch.
Absolutely. Eli's already had kind of a fantastic 2 years. Over the last 2 years, he really kind of broke out into on the competitive scene. Of course,
he's won 2 Grand Prix.
Right, yeah, and he's been playing for nearly 20 years now, and yeah, not really surprising. I feel like it was only a matter of time, really, before Eli kind of got, his first top finish.
That's right. And of course, for Oscar Christensen, a huge finish here for the young man from Denmark. He's playing Sultai Food, which of course is kind of the default deck for this tournament. But Eli Kassis actually brought something different to the table. He's on Golgari Adventure. For our viewers who are just tuning in, haven't really been keeping up as much on how the tournament went, what are the keys to the matchup here, Paul?
So I think the key for Eli's deck is the Edgewall Innkeeper. I think the really important thing for him is to get the Edgewall Innkeeper going and try to run out as many of the other adventure creatures as possible to kind of generate the card advantage with that one drop. Now on Oscar's side, a lot of different angles of attack, but what's going to be really important for his side is to make sure that he has an answer for the Edgewall Innkeeper, and he does. He has plenty. He's got the 4 copies of Noxious Grasp. He's got the Wicked Wolves. He's got Oko, which I can see potentially even just turning the Edgewall Innkeeper into an Elk, just to take that ability away. So lots of answers, but honestly, at the end of the day, this is just kind of your good old-fashioned mid-range matchup. The decks look slightly differently, but I think it's just going to be very close.
Okay, well, you mentioned Edgewall Innkeeper as a key card for Kassis. He used Once Upon a Time to find one, has the Forest here, and he's got it down on the battlefield turn 1. And another Once Upon a Time on the other side for Oscar Christensen. This is not a surprise, by the way, to see both players firing off the free Once Upon a Times on their first turns. It was the most widely played card in the entire tournament, full stop. And on top of it, it is pretty common with these type of decks to see the card played very early. Some of the decks can actually get away with waiting a turn or two to play it and still play it for free. But here, the mana creatures for Oscar, and over on Eli's side, the Innkeeper / lands is too important. So you'll see these fired off a lot. Now, right away, we've got a situation where Eli Kassis is to be in decision mode. He can use Noxious Grasp to just kill this Gilded Goose, potentially stunting the mana growth of Christensen if he'd like. Yeah, and he also could build his own mana out with a Paradise Druid if he wants.
And I think that's really what you want to be doing. You want to slow them down. The turn 1 Goose leads to a potential turn 2 Oko. And once you get into a situation where your opponent can deploy that Oko, then all of a sudden your Edgewall Innkeeper, your card advantage engine, is just turned into a 3/3. I mean, sure, that's a threat, but Oscar's deck has plenty of answers for just a vanilla 3/3 creature, whereas an Edgewall Innkeeper can just kind of snowball the game out of control.
Oscar's going to fight back, though, with the mana development here. He's going to play an untapped Breeding Pool into Paradise Druid before passing the turn back. There's Liliana off the top of the library for Eli Kassis, one of his very powerful late-game cards. He has a couple of those in the main. That's a Foulmire Knight. He's just going to cast it because he's going to draw the card here off of the Edgewall Innkeeper anyway, and he'd like to get something rolling.
Yeah, he just wants to continue putting pressure onto the battlefield. And, I think Eli might even want to be kind of the aggressor in the matchup. As the game goes longer and longer, Oscar just has kind of the over-the-top threats in cards like Casualties of War and, of course, the full 4 copies of Hydra Crisis.
This is really interesting position already here, Paul. Eli has offered the trade Edgewall Innkeeper for Paradise Druid, showing how important he thinks it is to keep the mana creatures off the other side of the battlefield, offering up one of his key card draw engines as a trade. And you saw Oscar pause there like, God, maybe I should take this. He decided, no, I'm not going to. The damage, not super relevant. It's only 1. It's really a question of, would I rather keep my Paradise Druid than you have your Innkeeper? And it looks like Eli Kassis has sussed out the situation correctly, because Oscar's like, nope.
Right. I mean, given that Oscar didn't have the...
Ooh, awkward.
Yeah, given that Eli did not... excuse me, did not given that Oscar did not have the Noxious Grass to kill the Edgewell Innkeeper, the next threat that Oscar could potentially play to get the Innkeeper off the battlefield would be a Wicked Wolf. So if the Paradise Druid stays on the battlefield, all of a sudden Oscar could potentially just run out of Wicked Wolf. So happy to just take that trade and kind of stunt Oscar's mana.
Yeah, as it turns out, Wicked Wolf or no, it was Castle Lochthwain coming into play tapped here for Oscar Christensen. And it looks like his turn is going to be Once Upon a Time. He does have access to an Assassin's Trophy that he could fire off, although it doesn't look like that's the name of the game at this juncture. So he just passes the turn back, and now we're back on Eli Kassis. He played a Temple of Malady. He resolved the scry by keeping the card on top of his library, so more bad news for Oscar if Eli likes what he sees there.
Oh, look at this. We're going to see...
Wow, Murderous Rider just cast it?
No swift end. He just wants to, again, continue putting creatures onto the battlefield. And, you know, it's one of those things when you look at a card like Murderous Rider, you're like, well, this is a 2-for-1. I want to use a removal effect first. But you don't feel so bad when you got that Edgewell Innkeeper in play. And by littering the board with more creatures, if Oscar plays something like a Nissa who shakes the world, Eli can just potentially kill the Nissa with his creatures instead of one of his removal spells.
Yeah, that is exactly, by the way, what Oscar has in his hand. In fact, he actually has 2 copies of Nissa who shakes the world. So before deciding what he wants to do for blocks, he's going to play Once Upon a Time here. And it looks like he just needed a land. He saw Hydroid Krasis in that pile. But, yeah, you know, he needs to make sure he keeps hitting his lands here so he can play that Nissa on time. He also has a fairly stacked hand with a Casualties of War, a second copy of Nissa as well. So a lot for him. He did end up taking the damage, by the way. He draws his card for the turn. It is another land, a swamp this time.
Yeah, one thing that I would be kind of mindful of if I'm on Oscar's side is, you know Nissa is one of my best cards. Mm-hmm. You just hardcast Murderous Rider. That would tell me that it's very likely that Eli has an additional way to kill a Planeswalker if I do run it out the next turn.
Yeah, he almost has to,
right?
To just play a 2/3 lifelinker cantrip.
Yeah.
And there we go. Nissa Who Shakes the World hits the battlefield here for Oscar Christensen. Going to untap a forest. But, as you predicted, Paul, Eli Kassis has the answer with Noxious Grasp in hand.
This is actually going to be huge if Eli actually uses a removal spell and just kills the animated land and then uses the creatures to finish off Nissa.
How about
that would be devastating.
Both the animated land and the Paradise Druid? That's a possibility now with Liliana.
Yes. So this is going to be powerful. However, Eli will not be able to get the Nissa Who Shakes the World off the battlefield if he does this.
But look at this. A land goes, like 2 mana sources and both blockers going away here.
I choose first, right?
Yeah. However, if Nissa stays in play, then Oscar now has access to a lot of mana on the following turn, which could allow him to play, you know, one of his heavy-hitting cards like Casualties of War, which would then kind of reset the board here, right? You would kill Liliana and potentially some other creatures. You know, I thought another potential consideration would be to, you know, maybe use a removal spell like a Murderous Rider or Noxious Grasp. As you can see, he's got both. If you kill the land and then kill the Nissa, your opponent is still very low on resources.
Right. In this case, Oscar has the additional breeding pool, so he has access to 6 mana next turn with the help of Nissa, as you'd point out here, Paul. And he even has Casualties of War, so this might not work out very well for Eli Kassis, all told. He's just going to go ahead. Eli's just going to go ahead and attack Oscar's life total here because he has the answers for Nissa anyway. No point in trying to chip away at the loyalty. But this is a huge turn for Oscar because he gets this one opening where he has Nissa Who Shakes the World, and he can take advantage of the mana development that you get from that.
So yeah, now that he has access to Casualties of War, he can use it to get 3 of the permanents off the battlefield. He's probably going to get the Temple of Malady, the Edgewell Innkeeper, and the Liliana. Potentially, I could also see him go after Castle Lochthwain if he thinks the game's going to go longer instead of the Temple of Malady.
Mm-hmm.
However,
the untapped breeding pool.
Ooh, there it is.
There it is. Casualties of War from Oscar Christensen. his high-end, most powerful option. This was the disaster scenario for Eli Kassis. By leaving Nissa on the battlefield, even with answers in hand, he opened up the door for this to happen, and it has happened. Now, the good news from Eli's perspective is he still will have answers for Nissa, who shakes the world, but his board's gone now.
Yeah, and the question right now is whether or not Eli will be able to draw a card once Casualties of War resolves. Due to Liliana's static ability, everything happens at the same time, so players are just
He should draw the
sure
card.
exactly.
Yeah, okay. And now we're going to see this swamp get activated, but the Foulmire Knight should prevent it from attacking, because Oscar, if he were to lose Nissa, which he's going to, really can't afford to be down on lands at this point.
So Eli was able to draw a lot of cards here, but Oscar got a very significant tempo swing here, right? He was able to destroy 3 permanents, and even if Eli has the ability to kill this Nissa, I mean, the damage might have already been done here.
Yeah, we'll see. Now, this is one of those classic examples where Eli Kassis, with more cards in hand, more gasoline, but a bit behind on board, is going to use this turn to even things up by killing Nissa, who shakes the world. He's also going to search around maybe for a land here with Once Upon a Time. And then we're going to see where it goes, because if he has enough time to deploy all of his cards, he could very well find himself ahead in this game. But if he doesn't, you know, land replacement Nissa next turn could put him too far behind.
Right. But Eli does have a fairly loaded hand here. This is, of course, the advantage of being heavy black and playing the full 4 copies of Murderous Rider. Eli has no shortage of ways to deal with Oscar's Planeswalkers. He's got multiple Noxious Grasps and the full 4 copies of Murderous Rider.
Ooh, that was a big draw step there for Christensen, because he needed a land here, an untapped land, to be able to redeploy Nissa, and I don't think he's found it.
Yeah, I think we're going to see a Hydrate Krasis for 2 here, just as a way to
Oh.
try to draw some lands.
So this was a big, big tempo loss, and he missed here as well. So Oscar Christensen actually is going to be significantly behind now, because he wasn't able to get right back on board with another Nissa and keep that pressure up.
This might actually be a pretty decent spot to just run out Massacre Girl, because you're just going to get a land here that prevents your opponent from running out Nissa, and you can actually just kill all the creatures on the battlefield.
This is a great spot. You get rid of the Krasis too. Look at that. Now down to 3 lands and a food for Oscar Christensen. He needed to find that land next turn, and he couldn't. Of course, now he finds it, and he has a Gilded Goose to go along with it. But is it going to be too late at this point to catch up? That's the question.
Yeah, currently, you know, Oscar just a little light on mana, and Eli just kind of has all the answers. One of the scariest cards in the matchup for Eli is the Hydrate Krasis, but because Oscar is just kind of choked on mana, even if he draws something like that, he won't be able to have a relevant enough threat on the battlefield that Eli can't answer.
And Eli has drawn very well. He has another Murderous Rider and another Noxious Grasp in his hand, and Liliana as well. And this is the downside, of course, to Assassin's Trophy, is that you do provide your opponent with additional mana, and Eli is just going to be efficient here and go ahead and crack Fable Passage as well. But now he has the option, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not quite to do Liliana plus Noxious Grasp, but but he can fire off Liliana here if he'd like.
Yeah, and it's going to be pretty difficult for Oscar to actually have an answer here. He would need land second Casualties of War as kind of his answer here, as he's already fired 1 off and an Assassin's Trophy. The really nice thing about playing Liliana Dreadhorde General as one of your top-end threats is that it does dodge kind of probably the most heavily played removal spell in the format, right? Both Ether Gust and Noxious Grasp cannot be used to kill Liliana Dreadhorde General. So that's kind of Eli's version of Casualties of War that we've seen in a lot of other decks.
That's right, and you know, the high end on Liliana is fantastic as well. Not only does she come down with a lot of loyalty, you can see 7 loyalty and a creature with a Planeswalker that was cast just this turn, but the ultimate is very, very real as well. Effectively a game-ending ultimate, having the opponents choose one card of each permanent type and get rid of all the rest. You know, they'll usually be sitting there with like a creature and a land and maybe a food or something like that. And that's just too much to come back from. And she gets to ultimate relatively quick. -9 is the ultimate. And, you know, effectively starting off at 7, it goes very quickly.
Yeah, I just don't know how Oscar's going to get out of this. He needs this Liliana is just going to take over the game. You know, Eli can just continue chump blocking. Even if Oscar runs out Nissa, animates a land, attacks, Eli simply just blocks with the zombie and just continues to get ahead on cards. And that's kind of the nature of these mid-range matchups. It's every single incremental advantage that you can accrue over time. That's what you want to be doing, right? All the little edges. Every time you're up a card, that adds up, especially because these games go 7, 8, 10 turns, right? And by the end of it, you know, you're going to be up 2 to 3 cards, and it's really, honestly, a lot of the time, last threat standing that ends up winning.
Mm-hmm. And if that threat happens to be Liliana Dreadhorde General, you are in great shape, and that is exactly where Eli Kassis finds himself after a proper slugfest here. Now he's going to minus Liliana Dreadhorde General, which is going to effectively take 2 more mana sources off the battlefield, and he's also got the answer for Nissa, and when this resolves, that's going to be it. There is no way for Oscar to come back from this. He's down to just 3 lands left on the battlefield and a food token, and he's facing down an opponent who has Liliana Dreadhorde General, and there's really no great answer for it from Oscar's side of the battlefield. So, yeah, I think that was the nails in the coffin there, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to be moving on to game 2, and Eli's going to get game 1 here.
Oko Thief of Crowns, of course, always a fine addition to the battlefield. He's going to make an elk of the food token and perhaps apply some pressure here to Liliana. Nope, just going to leave it back and say go after playing an additional land. But Eli in a commanding position at this point.
Yeah, even drew Vraska this turn.
All right.
To,
just make sure Oko doesn't get out of hand. Bye-bye. Of course, Vraska, Golgari Queen, is played not just by Eli Kassis in his green-black deck, but even actual Oko decks play it alongside Noxious Grasp as answers for opposing Okos, and that's exactly what happened here. Noxious Grasp and Overgrown Tomb in hand here for Oscar Christensen. He just doesn't have the tools to get the job done.
Yeah, and Eli playing it slow. Eli did have a removal spell here, but actually just chose to pass for a turn.
He's going to use Profane Insight to draw a card. And now we're going to see Noxious Grasp hit Vraska Golgari Queen, but very much going through the motions here for Oscar Christensen, as this deck just doesn't have the type of cards for this mana to be able to come back from a position like this.
One thing that I really like about Eli's deck is the fact that he's got those Massacre Girls, 2 Massacre Girls in the main, because, you know, one of the more problematic cards actually in this matchup is Wicked Wolf, as the Golgari deck just has a really difficult time getting that off the battlefield if there's food in play. And Massacre Girl at least gives you a chance to be able to get that off the battlefield.
Players having some fun here. Oscar knows he's going to lose this game, and he's teasing Eli a little.
7, you're at 17?
But this is just the going through the motions here. Puts him down to 7, 2, 4, 6, 7, 9. Yeah, he's got plenty enough for lethal. And it's another land off the top of the library. So that is game number 1 going to Eli Kassis. Well done, well played. And he is correct. If you heard Oscar mention that right quick, they don't actually consult their sideboards just yet.
Right. We're
playing best out of 5 here.
Yeah, best out of 5. Both players getting to play a game 1 on the play, potentially.
Yeah.
And then we'll have the sideboard match.
That's right. And, you know, one of the interesting things to point out, welcome back, by the way, he needed all of it, right? I mean, you saw Eli Kassis throw haymaker after haymaker, and we saw a huge 2 Liliana Dreadhorde Generals hit the battlefield that game. Massacre Girl to wipe up the board as well, and a bunch of spot removal to kill planeswalkers and a couple of creatures. And Eli needed all of it to find himself in that position where he had Liliana as the last card standing, basically.
Yeah, and the big thing from Eli's side is just the fact that he was able to just continue applying pressure and just keep putting all those creatures onto the battlefield, and the fact that the Edgewall Innkeeper also just allowed him to draw a couple of extra cards early meant that he had a nice board. And despite the fact that Oscar also had a fairly good draw in terms of just having some interaction, it didn't matter. He was just too far behind on cards.
Yeah, you know, and one of the really interesting things that we'll keep an eye out throughout the course of the match is the way that Eli played out. Once he got the Innkeeper down, he was just playing his cards. Like, he was like, here's a 1/1 Death Toucher, here's a 2/3 Lifelinker. He wasn't trying to get maximum value by waiting, killing a thing, getting it back, and getting the extra card. He knew he wanted to be on the battlefield in case a Planeswalker appeared. So that's just one of the many nuances that we're going to be bringing you over the course of the day. We're just getting rolling here on Sunday at the Mythic Championship. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, though, we'll have more live action from the feature match area. Don't go anywhere.
Just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you. You'd be like heaven to touch. I wanna hold you so much. At long last, love has arrived, and I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you. Long last, love has arrived, and I thank God I'm alive. You're just too good to be true. Can't take my eyes off of you.
And welcome back to the feature match area here at Mythic Championship VI. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe with Paul Cheon. Thanks so much for joining us for coverage here on a Sunday. We're in the top 8. We're still in the quarterfinals. In fact, just getting underway. If you're just tuning in, welcome. We're happy to have you along. We've got Eli Kassis on the left-hand side of your screen. That's Oscar Christensen on the right. Game number 1, Eli Kassis. It was a proper mid-range duke him out, but ultimately it was Eli Kassis who had a few more haymakers in the middle part of the game, was able to keep Oscar off of his mana for just long enough, and he was the one with the last important permanent standing. Now, though, Oscar gets to play a game 1 pre-sideboard. Remember, we don't go to sideboards until the 3rd game, so after this we'll be going to sideboards. And he's got the Gilded Goose to kick things off here, Paul, the ideal start.
And look at this. Eli, this time on the draw, being a little more patient here. He's got the Edgewall Innkeeper that he could potentially play on turn 1, but choosing to run out the Temple here instead. And Oscar really wants to find an untapped land here. If he does, he can play out an Oko, and he finds it. As you can take a look.
Very nice.
That was a huge, huge draw here from Oscar. Very likely to just run out the Oko here. Kind of put Eli to the test. Do you have Noxious Grasp on turn 2? If you don't, next turn I can make a 3/3. I can continue to put pressure on your life total.
So Eli Kassis finds himself in a position that, well, if you played in this tournament, you will have found yourself in this position many times before, but has he brought the tools to get the job done? And he has. This is a big part of the draw to why you want to play this deck, Paul, is not only do you get the Noxious Grasp, that, by the way, Oscar also has access to, but you also get the 4 Murderous Rider that can do a good job at taking down opposing Planeswalkers.
Yeah. Most of the Sultai Food decks only really just have access to those 4 Noxious Grasps because the mana base simply doesn't support you, the ability for you to play a double black spell. It's a little bit rough. You are stretching your mana because you are, of course, trying to get Oko into play as early as possible while also running a Gilded Goose out on turn 1.
It's interesting to try to conceptualize here how further ahead is Oscar having simply played the Oko even if it went away, right? All he's really getting is a food out of the deal. Otherwise, it was an even transaction for the players. In fact, even slightly favorable for Eli Kassis given that he only spent the 2 mana.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important factor was the fact that Oscar was on the play because that meant that Eli needed to be a little more reactive in the way he played out this game. As you saw in game 1, he started things off with an Edgewall Innkeeper and then just started running out threats, whereas here, he led out with a Temple of Malady just to make sure that he can find whatever answers Oscar might play after that turn 1 Gilded Goose.
Bad news here for Eli Kassis. He uses Legion's End to take care of Gilded Goose and says, let's take a look at that hand and see if you have any more. And Oscar says, I don't, but I do have land number 4 to go with my Paradise Druid, and I have 2 copies of Nissa Who Shakes the World, so you're going to be seeing that next turn regardless.
Yeah, that's really tough because Eli had the answer to 1, right? He has a Murderous Rider in hand, but Oscar next turn is just going to run out of land, play that Fabled Passage, play out the Nissa, and if Eli then takes another turn off here to kill it with the Murderous Rider, Oscar just has the backup.
It's interesting because what we'll see in that scenario is kind of what I was alluding to with the Oko. Yes, it died right away, but each of these Planeswalkers leaves something behind.
Right.
In Oko's case, it was just a food token and then that pressure that you mentioned. But still, that's pretty good. But going forward, it's going to be 3/3s.
Right.
And, you know, you'll see Eli Kassis' life total start to take hits here as he tries to juggle, well, do I need to kill Nissa right now, or can I develop out my board?
Yeah, that is the power of Planeswalkers, right? Even if you find a cheap, efficient answer to the Planeswalker, you still get a little bit of value. You're still kind of down a card, or half of a card, right? And if you want to, you know, trying to quantify like how much value food brings to you. But yeah, I use Noxious Grasp to kill your Oko, but that's fine because I still had a food. In this instance, he's still going to have a 3/3.
That's right. Oscar Christensen drew a Gilded Goose for the turn, and Eli knows exactly what's in Oscar's hand from this point because he saw his hand last turn and there wasn't a goose. And he really wished there was a goose because he would have actually got it with the Legion's End. But as it turns out, he drew on the next turn.
Eli might be considering some other options here. Given the fact that Oscar has a redundant copy of Nissa Who Shakes the World, maybe he's going to just try to put some creatures on the battlefield and keep his life total high, right? He can just run out Edgewall Innkeeper and hard cast Lovestruck Beast. If he does that, Oscar can't run his 3/3s, and maybe that'll buy Eli enough time to kind of get back into this game.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if he took that line here, Paul. I mean, it's always tempting to just get Nissa off the battlefield and force your opponent to tap a bunch of mana to recast another one, but it really doesn't get you that much further ahead when you already know they have the one for sure anyway.
Right. Oscar's down to 1 card, and you already know what it is, right? If you knew he had something like a Hydrate Crisis, sure, you should use the Murderous Rider because you don't want them to leverage the mana benefits that you get from Nissa. But now, given the backup Nissa, you know, I think you just kind of hope your opponent doesn't draw the Hydrate Crisis and use that Lovestruck Beast here to kind of stabilize this board.
That's exactly what Kassis is going to do. He runs out the Innkeeper, plays the Beast, draws his card, and passes a turn back. This is kind of a hold your breath moment, though, for Kassis, because if Oscar can find the Hydrate Crisis that we mentioned, that could be a blowout. That could be the type of play that puts Oscar over the top of this game and makes it really difficult for Eli to come back. Now, as it turns out, we get the ultimate sweat here, Paul. It was once upon a time, so he still may find it. In fact, he's possibly more likely to do so, even if it does cost him 2 mana. Let's see if he can find that Crisis. That's certainly what Oscar wants to see here.
Yeah, Wicked Wolf would also be a fine option here. He has 2 food in play with the Gilded Goose. He can use Wicked Wolf to get either the Lovestruck Beast or the Edgewall Innkeeper off the battlefield.
Yikes, he has to settle for land or a goose.
Oh, that is rough.
That's really a miss here. I mean, not literal, but boy, that was, of the list of things that he wanted to see, Fabled Passage was not high on it. So he's going to have to settle for Fabled Passage. And that's kind of what he gets to do this turn. I mean, he gets to leverage Nissa and all that, but the Lovestruck Beast sitting over there, kind of laughing.
Yeah.
Fabled Passage hits the battlefield. Nissa gets activated. But with Eli at a pretty cushy 16 life, there's just really no spot here where Oscar's going to be able to start jamming through damage just yet.
As you can see, there's some pause here, and the card that Oscar's kind of afraid of right now is Massacre Girl. We saw that Eli was able to use Massacre Girl to get all the lands off the battlefield, and that would set Oscar back. So he's thinking about it, but you know, it's not really a winning line here if he just chooses not to animate his lands.
It was funny because you saw Kassis kind of laugh. He's like, I know what you're thinking about. You just don't want to get Massacre Girl out of here. So Eli now is going to start building up some pretty serious defense. He plays Foulmire Knight, but remember, there's an Edgewall Innkeeper on the battlefield, so he gets to draw cards straight away. And he even has another one that he can play here, and he's going to do so.
Yeah, these are fantastic. And at this point, Oscar's plan here is to try to get Nissa to the ultimate. Nissa's -8 allows you to search your entire search your library, excuse me, and get all the force out of your deck, and then all of a sudden, all of your lands are indestructible, meaning those Foulmire Knights no longer effective blockers against those lands.
And as you can see, right now, Eli Kassis is in a nice position as far as ground defense goes. With the 5/5 plus the 2/1/1 Death Touchers, Oscar Christensen just not likely to have any great attacks coming forward. But still, you got to be nervous if you're in Eli's seat. We're still in that zone where he does need to make sure he takes out Nissa before next turn because of the ultimate threat that you mentioned, and a Hydrate Crisis off the top could put Eli in a devastatingly bad position. So let's see if Christensen can find it. No, it was just another land.
Yeah, and now we're in a situation where Oscar can't really attack, and Eli's just up a lot of cards, right? He's been running out those Foulmire Knights. The Edgewall Innkeepers have been replacing themselves. And honestly, Oscar just doesn't really have a good attack right now. That miss on Once Upon a Time was huge. There were a number of different creatures he could have hit, and all he hit was simply a land.
Oh, not okay.
And there we go, sending the turn back. Eli does have Once Upon a Time in his hand, and there's a land off the top of the library as well. And you can see his hand's pretty nice. Murderous Rider, which we've known about for a while, and it is time to fire that off here on Nissa. And that's exactly what he's going to do here. And then he leaves him Once Upon a Time available, or he could even cast the Murderous Rider if he'd like.
Yeah, this just puts an extra threat on the battlefield, and it replaces itself. So Eli's now drawn 4 cards off that Edgewall Innkeeper.
Jeez. And once again, Christensen's going to continue to make food on end step, but he just doesn't have. He needs to find something. I mean, we've seen Once Upon a Time plus draw steps, and he just can't seem to find any action.
He really. Oh, there it is.
Hydroid Krasis off the top of the library.
That was the card. That was the card. If you look at Eli's hand, he's got a lot of great stuff, but doesn't have a way to kill this Nissa. So what Oscar needs to do, he really should probably set up a turn where he can play Nissa, and then on the following turn, run out a giant Hydroid Krasis and just kind of get back all the cards that he's down right now.
Now, is there a world where he can do both this turn and it's actually reasonable to do so, or is it just he needs to go for the huge Krasis?
He can. He can play. So he can play a Nissa here by tapping maybe
the mana creatures,
all the non-forests.
Yeah,
all the mana sources that are not forests. But given the way he's tapping right now, it doesn't look like he's planning on playing a Hydroid Krasis this turn. He's already tapping his forest here, so he's probably going to run out the Nissa, untap, and then just try to get maximum value next turn.
Wow, what happens if Eli draws Massacre Girl here? Does everything go away?
Everything dies. I mean, there's like 5 1-toughness creatures in play.
That would be the sweetest Massacre Girl ever.
I mean, he can try to find it too, right? He's got Once Upon a Time in hand, and he has the mana to run out land and then play Massacre Girl.
Oh my God, if he finds a Massacre Girl and kills 4 of Oscar's lands as well as all of his creatures. Now, of course, Eli would be losing his board as well, make no mistake. But you would have an opponent on 2 lands plus Nissa. I think you'd take that.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting, though, because it's really tempting to also just run out Liliana here, right? Because Oscar only has 1 card in hand. What's the chances that that specific card is just Hydroid Krasis?
Yeah, but also it looks like there's another Murderous Rider here in hand for Kassis.
Oh, he found one.
Yes, he did. So he can he can run Rankle, Master of Pranks out, but still just have the answer here for Nissa.
So now Oscar's going to have to block here, but that kind of also tips his hand here, right? It's like, why would you block with this Gilded Goose? So then Eli has to think, okay, is the last card in your hand a Hydroid Krasis? And if it is, then I'm going to need to use this Murderous Rider here so that you don't get all that mana.
And that's exactly what he's going to do. A huge play here for Eli Kassis, because Christensen's entire line was trying to find Hydroid Krasis and set up a massive Krasis, and that has just been foiled. Now Oscar is very much at the mercy of the top of his library. Now, he does have a decent amount of mana. He can run out a Krasis, for 6 here. Not bad.
Yeah, finding an untapped land was actually not bad here because his life total isn't really pressured right now, so he can just run out a 6/6 Hydroid Krasis. So the land was actually kind of ideal here.
And Kassis can pat himself on the back there like, whoo, glad I didn't risk it. So 3 cards go into hand now, including another Hydroid Krasis, by the way.
And a
casualties. Oh, boy. Still, you got to like the look of a Massacre Girl here if Eli can find it. Now he drew Order of Midnight. So he's got kind of an interesting scenario where he can use Once Upon a Time. But that would only leave him 5 mana available after that.
Yeah, and running out the Liliana now is not quite as desirable because there is that 6/6 Krasis on the battlefield. I don't believe Eli has an additional way to deal with a creature just yet. I don't think he has a removal spell, so maybe he's going to just start running out threats and drawing some cards. Of course, you can just cast Murderous Rider, draw a card. Alternatively, the line you mentioned is just casting Once Upon a Time and seeing if you hit Massacre Girl. If you do that, I mean, Oscar would just be down to 3 lands.
Yes. And you would be on 6 lands. Oh, here we go. He's going to look for it. Once Upon a Time goes on the stack. Can he find a Massacre Girl to wipe this entire board? No.
No.
he missed here. He found another copy of Edgewall Innkeeper, not the card that he needed. That said, we still have a game here. Eli Kassis at 10 life, but really only under threat in the sky.
Yeah. But, I mean, the Edgewall Innkeeper isn't the worst because he does have the ability this turn to just play Edgewall Innkeeper and then hard cast Murderous Rider,
Right.
which means now every adventure card he casts from here on out is going to draw him 2 cards.
And a lot of them are cheap. You know, he can draw another Foulmire Knight or something that's just 1 mana, draw 2 cards. And you get through a lot of your library by doing that.
And Eli doesn't really have to worry about the ground forces right now, as he has that one pretty much locked up here with the Foulmire Knights, the Murderous Riders, and that Left-Struck Beast.
Yeah, and then also things work out decently for Eli as well because he does have the 2 lifelinkers on the ground. Did I just see
He found it.
what I thought I saw? There's a Massacre Girl
I'm pretty
in
sure he
hand
found
for
it.
Eli Kassis. He did.
That was big.
That's hot.
I do not think Oscar can come back here if Eli gets to untap here.
Oh my
and run
God.
out the Massacre Girl.
We are going to see the most devastating Massacre Girl next turn. Potential to wipe away 4 lands from Oscar Christensen, as well as his only 2 creatures, leaving him with 5 food and, well, I guess 4 lands here.
It's gonna be basically a Wrath of God and an Armageddon, right? It's gonna kill all the creatures and half of your opponent's lands.
So this is an attack for 6 in the air. There's certainly a temptation here for Rankle to just block to soak up the 3 damage if your plan is just to run out Massacre Girl anyway.
Yeah, and next turn, Eli, before he runs out the Massacre Girl, probably just gonna attack with the Murderous Riders too to gain some life.
So now we know that there's another Hydrate Krasis in hand here for Christensen, so it looks like his best line of play is to just completely tap out here and run out another one for, what, 7?
7?
But that's going to die too.
Yeah, that is going to die. So Oscar will likely be down to 4 lands. I mean, he has been able to refill up his hand.
Yeah. So, you know, if he gets to untap, play land number 5, and have a bunch of cards in hand, it's not a complete disaster. I wouldn't call it a good scenario.
Yeah, but keep in mind, Eli's hand is also pretty loaded here, right? He's going
Yes.
to play out the Massacre Girl, and then he also has 2 copies of Liliana Dreadhorde General that he's going to follow that up with. Also, he's got an Order of Midnight that he can use to get back the Edgewall Innkeeper that's going to die from this Massacre Girl.
Yeah, I like Eli Kassis' spot. Once he found that Massacre Girl, things started looking much better. And look at this huge attack now from Eli. There's only 1 blocker on the other side of the battlefield. He knows he's going to lose his board anyway. He may as well get in for a huge hit.
He knows what's coming.
Oh, yeah.
So at this point, you just want to save your life total as much as you can. So probably just going to be putting that Hydra Krasis in front of the Left-Struck Beast because there's no way any of the other creatures will survive. There's just too much on the battlefield.
That's right. And too many 1 toughness creatures to get the ball rolling.
4, 11, yes.
That can be the trick with Massacre Girl, is that if there's nothing that dies to the first trigger, then it stops right there. But in this board state, everything is going to get completely decimated.
Here we go.
This is the best Massacre Girl I've ever seen. Boom! Away goes the entire board. Eli Kassis just very calmly like, is this good? Just killed a 7/7, a 6/6, 4 lands.
By the way, he's also got a 4/4 menace creature in play.
Yeah, that's really important,
You
right?
know.
Because if there are follow-up, say, Planeswalkers, he automatically has pressure. Of course, Massacre Girl on her own can't kill either of the Planeswalkers, but at least you're doing something right away.
Yeah, it's very relevant because several of Oscar's follow-up plays here involve playing a Planeswalker and making a 3/3 and attacking immediately. So having that 4/4 in play also helps pad Eli's life total.
Incredible play there from Eli Kassis. And it looks like he's also going to follow up with his Order of Midnight. And he's going to get back, I think he got back Rankle. So another good setup for the next turn, although we know here in the booth and you at home, of course, that he is sitting on those 2 copies of Liliana, and that's really his long-term game plan. And interestingly, that is also how Game 1 played out, right? A whole lot of exchanging of resources, but by the end of it, Liliana was the last card standing, and that's what ended up winning for Eli in Game 1.
Yeah, and taking a look at Oscar's hand, I mean, his hand is fairly great here. The Krasis allowed him to kind of refill, and he's got a lot of different options here, none of which, of course, answered the Massacre Girl that's in play.
Including this one. That's Frasca.
Sacrifice. I gain 1. 17.
So Oscar's going to sacrifice a permanent, in this case a food, that'll gain him a life, and then he gets to draw a card. But I'll tell you, if I'm in Eli Kassis' seat, I'm like, no problem. That you spent 4 mana to draw a card here.
And keep in mind, Eli returned Rankle. So he simply just needs to play out Rankle and then just can use both of his creatures to just get Vraska off the battlefield.
Haste on Rankle will allow 7 damage to come through. And wow, I mean, what a huge swing there for Eli Kassis. Not the turn prior, that one was obviously huge, but this one was too. I mean, that whole entire turn for Oscar was just 4 mana, draw a card, gain a life. And Eli was able to get the Planeswalker off the battlefield using no additional cards from hand and limit the damage to that. He has really been on damage control this whole time by saying, okay, you're going to make, 1 food token kill your Oko. You're going to make 1, land into a 3/3, kill your Nissa. Now, the other Nissa, of course, ended up making a bunch of them, but they ended up being a liability. So here we go, 4/4 Krasis now for Christensen, trying desperately to stabilize the board. But look at this, the hits keep coming. Who needs Liliana anyway? That's Noxious Grasp to kill the opposing Hydrate Krasis. And oh, by the way, follow up Liliana Dreadhorde General, make a zombie and start smashing.
And look at how quickly this has turned around now. I mean, Eli has Oscar dead next turn.
Cards 1.
This is an attack for 9, followed up by an attack for 11 next turn.
Eli Kassis riding the wave of value that he created a few turns ago with Massacre Girl and has actually turned this into a tempo game in his favor. Now, a Casualties of War will be able to take down a threat plus a Planeswalker and then a land of his choice. But right now, Oscar is still so far behind, even just on board. He's almost dead on board.
Oscar has 3 copies of Noxious Grasp in hand, but he had no targets.
And that's, of course, by design if you're in
Right.
Eli's seat, right? He specifically wanted to play a deck that dodged a 4-of that he thought the majority of the competition would be playing. And he must have been thrilled when he saw the metagame breakdown, because it wasn't just the majority, it was a lot more than that. And things working out really well for Eli, finding himself in the top 8 playing green-black here. So this is an attack that would put Oscar down to 1 if he, depending on how he decides to block. Yeah, and the awkward part is that he actually is compelled to block Rankle because of Rankle's one of the abilities is each player loses a life and draws a card. So it actually was a lethal attack, assuming that Eli would have activated that. But if you're sitting in Oscar's seat, you're like, come on, dude. Like, this has been absolutely brutal. Leading up to and then after that Massacre Girl, Eli Kassis has used up all of his mana and kept massive pressure on Oscar while taking his threats and blockers away, too.
I mean, if you look at Eli's deck, he honestly, most of his threats and creatures are black. I mean, sure, the Edgewall Innkeeper's green, but he doesn't have that many. He's got 4 Edgewall Innkeepers, a few Lovestruck Beasts, and 2 copies of Vraska that are targets for Noxious Grasp.
That's right. And his really key finishers aren't.
Right.
The Lilianas, for example, are a big part of the reason why not.
Wicked Wolf was a card that could have come in handy earlier when Oscar, kind of came off with that blistering start, but the Lovestruck Beast really just kind of held the fort and prevented Oscar from, trying to finish the game off. I mean, he had turn 2 Oko. He had turn 4 Nissa with a backup Nissa, but it didn't matter.
So Wicked Wolf hits the battlefield and eats Rankle, and that would put Christensen at a virtual 7 here with a food being eaten, so he is technically alive still.
But there's just too much coming from Eli's side, right?
That's right.
You're going to be attacking Oscar down to 1 here. After Oscar's forced to sacrifice a food, you're going to make another zombie. And then look at his hand. He's got 2 more Murder Striders and a Lovestruck Beast.
Right. And, of course, one of the weaknesses to Wicked Wolf, it's doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, but it does have to tap when you use that indestructible eat a food ability, so you can use Murderous Rider to effectively take it out as a blocker, even if it's just temporary. But in the meantime, he's not even going to need it. Look at this board. Come on. He just added, what, 8 more power to the board this turn.
Well, that's the 4th Noxious Grasp.
Is it really? Is he literally staring at 4 Noxious Grasp with no target? Oh, there's
the full play set.
Yeah,
4 of a kind.
There's the beast now, but still 4 of a kind.
I mean, I suppose he could make his wolf indestructible and gain 4 life, but I guess sacking the food is better.
And again, I mentioned this play last time, but the Murderous Rider is going to target the Wicked Wolf, and Christensen's going to do some math here. Save his wolf.
You go to 10? Yes.
Oh, he does have a target for Noxious Grasp.
Yeah.
That 1/1 token and the Love Struck Beast now.
And the beast
so,
too, yeah.
So he's not totally dead yet.
Is
Wait,
he
no, he
not?
still might be.
Yeah,
So
he's still taking
he has 8
here
lands.
and going to 7, so he is dead, I think. Oh, he gains 2 from
he goes to 9.
So he's actually at 1.
He goes back to 1.
Man, you got to give it to Oscar Christensen. He has been very far behind every single turn and has still managed to kind of scrap it out. The difficult part for him is that there's just not that many ways for him to come back from being this far behind. The Casualties of War can help a lot, but not quite enough here.
Did Eli draw a card?
From what?
The Noxious Grasp?
So you're killing.
Looks like he missed the first trigger.
I think he did miss it.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, Paul's referring to Liliana Dreadhorde General's static ability here.
Go to 9. Take 8.
But I think Eli is pretty aware that this is probably not going to matter. Just
Right.
simply too far ahead on cards.
Especially with another Murderous Rider in hand.
And another zombie.
And another zombie coming, and another Murderous Rider hitting the battlefield as well.
No, you should do us in the end step, right? I believe so. Yeah. So no, it doesn't. It's close.
All right, now, now with no food left on the battlefield, Kassis was like, "When does that wolf still have indestructible?" And Oscar said, "No, you did it on my end step." So Kassis says, "Well, I'll just take it out right now. Then we'll just get rid of that thing, and that's going to do it." Game number 2 goes to Eli Kassis. Boy, he's got to frame that Massacre Girl at home because that thing destroyed. Oh, like you said, it felt like both Wrath of God and Armageddon to go old school on our listeners.
Turns out that gets it done. You know, Oscar also having a little fun with it, making the comment there at the end that, yeah, this is a close game, right?
Yeah, close
Yeah.
one. And again, you know, I do have to say, you know, respect there to Oscar for fighting it out. There's no time limit on these matches, and you never know what can happen, so you absolutely should keep fighting. But as it stood, I think he knew as well as Eli knew that there was really no realistic way for him to come back.
I think the key adjustments that Eli made to this Golgari Adventure deck is really kind of why he's sitting here, right? You know, the previous versions of this deck used to play cards like Questing Beast, and now all the top end threats in Eli's deck is black.
Right.
No Ether Gust, no Noxious Grasp. Those cards don't do anything. And there probably have been countless games where those cards have just been stranded in his opponent's hand while he continues to get ahead on cards with all these other cards. And the fact that Massacre Girl can just, again, the food decks rely so heavily on just sometimes getting a really wide board, making a bunch of food into 3/3 tokens, animating a bunch of lands. The fact that at some point, because the games go long, you can find that Massacre Girl to just wipe out all your opponent's lands. Even if they have a Planeswalker in play, a lot of the time, the damage will be done. It's not going to matter.
Yeah, really impressive stuff from Massacre Girl here. And also, that gives Eli Kassis a tool that Oscar Christensen just simply doesn't have. You know, his most powerful top-end come-from-behind style play is Casualties of War, and it just doesn't have the same effect that we saw from Massacre Girl. In fact, very few cards in the format would.
You know, it honestly didn't really feel that impressive. I mean, he cast Casualties of War both games.
Yeah, it was
right?
like, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, the impressive card was Massacre Girl
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, well, you know what? We've got our other quarterfinal match underway here between Louis Deltour from France and Ondřej Stráský from Czech Republic, and they are battling it out on our back table. As we come in, they are tied at a game apiece. the matchup, by the way, is Sultai Food versus Simic Food here. You can take a look at Louis' deck list and see that he's playing, well, this is the deck that we saw the most. You know, he's got a couple of, you see the negate over there. That's kind of cute. A good option on open deck lists like we have here, and the double casualties of war up top as well.
Yeah, that's, I think, commonly been what we see at the top end of the curve. 2 casualties, or maybe some combination of Liliana and casualties.
Now, let's take a look at the sideboard here, though, because this is where things get really important, Paul, because we are coming into game number 3 on the other quarterfinal match between Ondřej and Louis. We play best 3 out of 5 here on Sunday, and that means that the players play 2 unsideboarded game 1s, as it were, and then they can move to their sideboards. That's where we're coming into this match. So Louis will have just consulted this board. Anything great?
Yeah, Liliana Dreadhorde General is a card that really stands out. Again, Ondřej is actually playing Simic Food, so
Yes.
he's going to be playing Ether Gust, so Liliana is able to dodge that. Veil of Summer is also going to be a card that I think is going to be very important. Of course, you're going to expect Ether Gust to come in just because, you know, Ondřej's playing a bunch of green cards. But Veil of Summer is the big card because on the other side, one of Ondřej's big top-end threats is Mass Manipulation. That is the card that is, as you can see, the 2 copies here. That's the card that Stráský's been relying on to kind of take over the late game. It's like, okay, we're both going to be playing Planeswalkers. We're going to have a bunch of things. And then all of a sudden, you can just Mass Manipulation for 10, 12, steal your walkers, steal your creatures, and all of a sudden, you're just way too far ahead. But now, for the low cost of 1 green mana, you can counter that card. So it's actually going to be really interesting to see if Stráský even decides to keep Mass Manipulation, knowing that his opponent might bring in Veil of Summer.
Let's take a look at the sideboard here for Stráský. What are the big hitters here?
You know what? I'm going to talk about it again. Veil of Summer
Yeah.
in Stráský's sideboard because Louis' top-end card is Casualties of War. And again, this is a 1-mana answer to that powerful 6-mana spell. So there's going to be this dance. And because of the existence of this card, players are also going to be playing very differently after sideboard. I think more often than not, you're going to see players be a lot more proactive with the removal spells the moment that their opponent taps out, right? You cannot let your opponent untap anymore after sideboard because it's all of a sudden, hey, look, you're going to Brazen Borrower my card. No, I'm going to Veil of Summer. I'm going to counter your spell and draw a card. And, you know, the more often that happens, the further you're going to fall behind on cards. And because of that fear, because of that blowout potential, players, again, are going to be a lot more aggressive and wait to use their removal spells when players tap out.
All right, let's get underway here in game number 3 between Louis and Ondřej. And he's going to kick things off with Once Upon a Time. A card that has a profound impact on Standard. Getting what you need when you need it.
Yeah. I mean, especially in these matchups, you know, it allows you to find the mana creatures early, which is absolutely crucial in this deck. You really want to make sure you can get those Planeswalkers ahead of the curve, right? You want to get that Oko on turn 2. You want to get that Nissa on turn 4. But more importantly, also just a lot of the big threats in this deck are the creatures, right? Being able to find that Wicked Wolf or Hydrokrasis in the late game, the flexibility that this card provides is part of the reason why it was the most played card of the tournament.
Ondřej Stráský with particularly, at least potentially, so much on the line here in the top 8. A lot of times you cross that line and you get the top 8, you figure, you know, this is a career accomplishment. The money jumps are huge from not top 8 to top 8, etc. But, you know, we are starting to shape up towards the end of the season here where the players are looking forward to the World Championship next year, you know, that'll happen next year, as well as slots in the MPL itself. You know, we're talking about huge monetary potential as well as the next, I don't know, year or 2 of your life, maybe even longer, you know, what your career looks like. And for somebody like Ondřej Stráský, he feels like if he can finish in the finals here, first or second place, that could put him in a very good position to try to make a run at either MPL, Worlds, or maybe even both.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be completely life-changing. You know,
Yeah.
Ondřej's already been, top-level competitive Magic player for a very, very long time. But, the scene is changing. Now, we're in a world where, being a top-level competitive Magic player, I mean, the implications, especially financially, are huge.
Yes.
And so this is a huge, of course, it's a very important top 8 for everybody because Stráský is already in fairly good position. He has a lot of Mythic points already built up. So again, a good finish here, first or second place here, could mean that he has a really, really good shot of making it into the MPL next year.
That's right. And boy, that's a lot to play for. And I can tell you, he was feeling it this morning as well. This wasn't one of those, hey, I made a top 8, let's just see what happens. You never really know. This was, he's got goals, and he really wants to try to get across that finish line. But as of now, Louis Deltour says, yeah, I wouldn't mind making the finals either. Maybe he hasn't had quite the season that Ondřej has, but there's still significant money jumps going forward here in the top 8. And, of course, every player wants the trophy.
Yeah, and, of course, the winner of this tournament also getting a slot into the World Championship.
Easy mode, baby. Just win one of these Mythic Championships.
That's it?
It's simple.
Yeah, okay. 1 in 8 shot now, right?
Mm-hmm. The winner of this match will advance to the semifinals. Right now, a lot of mana on the battlefield for both players. There's 3 copies of Paradise Druid between them, but Louis Deltour is the one who's a bit ahead here. He's got Oko, Thief of Crowns, protecting it with Negate as well.
It's likely running out of Wicked Wolf. Try to deny some of that mana, get that Paradise Druid off the battlefield. Now Ondřej's going to kind of hope that Louis doesn't have his own Wicked Wolf here, as he would be able to use it to get Stráský's Wicked Wolf off the battlefield. But, wow, a lot of options here for Louis. He does have the 5th Mana Source, and he does have Nissa, who shakes the world. So he can.
He also has Wicked Wolf, apparently.
He does have Wicked Wolf. So if he plays out the Nissa, he won't be able to play out the Wicked Wolf. And because he doesn't have a breeding pool, he won't be able to go Nissa, untap breeding pool, and cast Ether Gust. But, he can be the first player to just have 2 Planeswalkers in the battlefield. And there is a lot of value in that.
He's really going into the tank here about whether it's more important to get Wicked Wolf or maybe a Paradise Druid off the battlefield now. The window for Wicked Wolf is open, right? There is no food for Stráský, so he could simply have wolf-on-wolf crime here where Stráský ends up with no Wicked Wolf to speak of. But, as you mentioned, getting Nissa on the battlefield first and putting that insane pressure on your opponent to deal with Nissa immediately is very tempting here.
Yeah, and I think Louis' plan here is just to have 2 3/3s on the battlefield as blockers. In fact, he can actually just attack with Nissa, who shakes the world here, as Stráský doesn't have a food here to sacrifice. Although, now that he's untapped the forest, maybe he doesn't want to offer that trade, because losing a forest here means that you lose that two sources of mana instead of just one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, currently it gives him the option on sacrificing the food, but I feel like you and I were both thinking, well, that food's probably going to become a 3/3 anyway, right? In which case it loses its abilities. Well, he offered the trade and Stráský took it.
Yeah, I thought if you're going to untap a land with this, I thought he was going to go with the swamp there instead of the forest, because of all the mana that you get from Nissa, who shakes the world.
Wow,
Whoa,
and look at this. Mass manipulation from Ondřej Stráský targeting Nissa. He says, I'd like one of those for myself, thank you very much. And also, he gets the added benefit of his Nissa starts off at 6 loyalty going to 7 rather than 5 to 6.
So he gets one step closer to the ultimate here. Wow.
Mass manipulation, a huge play. Again, we mentioned before that Louis had options on casting a Wicked Wolf to either deal with the opposing Wicked Wolf or a very real consideration of dealing with Paradise Druid, and this is why, although perhaps a bit of a backfire here, Ether Gust is going to get Nissa off the battlefield back onto the top of the library for Deltour. Now that looks like a blowout. It's not quite as bad as it looks from Stráský's perspective. That was a card out of hand for Ether Gust, and he doesn't get the Nissa right now. He has to draw it as well. But still, that was kind of necessary evil there for Louis to take care of that Nissa.
It's just far too important. You need
Yeah.
to just get Planeswalkers off the battlefield. You just can't let your opponent untap. I mean, that's kind of just the nature of this matchup. We talked about it yesterday. It's kind of that tug of war. You play Planeswalker, I kill your Planeswalker.
All right, here we go. It's a Hydroid Crisis. This one's for, what, 5? So a couple of cards in hand here for Stráský. And the interesting part about this, though, is that Stráský kind of broke serve, right? He stole the tempo advantage back by using mass manipulation, and now he's the one who's being proactive and adding things to the board and kind of forcing Deltour to react to him. Still, this is very close in the middle part of the game here. Deltour's going to make a food.
Oh, is he going to play? So he has a Wicked Wolf in hand. He can actually just play Wicked Wolf and kill the Hydroid Crisis by sacking 2 of the food that he has in play.
Okay, that's what he's going to do. So he'll delay casting Nissa for a turn here, but in order to do something very important, which is to clear away a Crisis that would threaten Nissa anyway. And again, it's, you know, I view it like a tennis match. It's like, okay, he hit the ball back. Now Stráský's turn is he's got to put the ball back in Louis Deltour's court because his board state right now doesn't do that. Even though he has the 3 creatures out, he needs something better than that to really force Louis to react to him rather than be like, Nissa? I just get to have a Nissa and start taking over the game with
Yeah, he's got an Ether Gust in hand. Now, a couple of different options, but none of them look especially good here, right? He could Ether Gust the food and attack Oko down to 2, but the important thing is Oko would still be in play then. So taking a look at Stráský's hand, I mean, not a whole lot of options, right? The only thing he can do is either burn out the Ether Gust or cast Once Upon a Time. He might just lead with Once Upon a Time just to see where he's at, get a little more information before deciding what to do. It looks like he's actually just going to pass instead.
That way he can do Castle Vantress plus Ether Gust, it looks like.
Yeah, I imagine he's probably going to go Once Upon a Time, unless he's specifically looking for a spell and not a creature, just because you get to look for more cards.
Get the card in your hand right away.
Yeah,
So.
and he probably wants to keep up Ether Gust here. He knows Louis has Nissa, so he wants to use Ether Gust on the cast on Nissa so that Louis can't actually animate one of the lands.
And there's that Ether Gust on Nissa, but Louis Deltour says, you know what I'd like to draw next turn? Yes, that same Nissa yet again. So instead he just gets to attack with Wicked Wolf, but it is a significant tempo play here, although you see Oko now up to 11, which does happen. So this is Castle Vantress being activated.
So he's doing this over Once Upon a Time, so he must be looking for a highly specific card. Perhaps another Mass Manipulation. He's got 2 copies of that in his deck. That would be big here.
You meant like a specific card that's not
a creature.
Creature.
Right? Because Once Upon a Time lets you hit creatures and lands. But if he finds a Mass Manipulation, he can get both the Wicked Wolf and an Oko here.
He did put one on top.
This could be a Nissa.
Couldn't quite see what it was, but we'll find out shortly, I assume. Was it the breeding?
Untapped land.
Oh, it was Gadwick the Wizened.
Whoa. Wow.
So he could draw 5 or 6 cards here. He might want to leave that island back as a blocker, I guess? Or an attacker, maybe?
That's what it seems like.
He does it for 5.
Yeah, that is big.
That's some sweet technology right there. Draw 5 cards. It's like additional copies of Hydroid Crisis.
Yeah, you actually draw cards at a far more efficient rate here, right? Because
Yes.
for every mana that you put into this, you get to draw an additional card. And it also has relevant line of text sometimes, right? Whenever you cast a blue spell, you can tap a non-land permanent your opponent controls. And actually, Louis can steal the Gadwick if he wants to trade a food for that Gadwick.
Yeah, it's going to depend on how big of a deal he thinks that that triggered ability is. Plus, I mean, we are talking about another 3/3 on the battlefield. Right. It does add up pretty quickly.
Well, yeah, and not only that, Louis has blue spells in his deck too, right? Like
right, the triggered ability matters.
Right, and he's the aggressor right now. So, given that Stráský's drawn a lot of cards, I feel like Louis would rather try to close out this game sooner rather than later.
And that's exactly what he's trying to do here. He's going to send in with the Wicked Wolf, the Island, and the Elk. Ondřej's going to block Island against Island, but he is going to take the rest.
He's going to take 8.
Yeah, right on the chin here. So down to 7 goes Stráský. Is this one slipping away? You know, what we've mentioned before, time and time again, is the player with the Nissa and the Oko, they're just ahead. Like, that is the whole point of this deck. If you look over and you see a player with Nissa and Oko on the battlefield, they are very, very likely winning that game. And even though we've seen some powerful plays from Stráský, Deltour's just had this set up for a little too long now.
Yeah, but now Stráský, you know, he has the potential here to kill Nissa. If he can find an answer for that elk that's on the battlefield, then he can attack with all 3 of his creatures here, get Nissa off the battlefield. And then if he has a blue instant that's interactive that he can play on Louis' turn, he can also save damage, right? With Gadwick in play, he can, for example, let's say he has something like a Brazen Borrower, he can use it to bounce something and tap something. He does have something here. He has an Ether Gust. So if he casts the Ether Gust on Louis' turn, he can actually shut down 2 permanents, which would maybe buy him time to not only be able to kill this Nissa this turn, but also just, you know, not take lethal damage.
Yeah, this is huge, by the way. Stráský needs to get this going, and he needs to get it going soon. Ooh. So it looks like he wants to just take care of Nissa the good old-fashioned way here, clear out the blockers, and start attacking. Because all 3 of his creatures, if they attack Nissa, are plenty enough here, actually attacking for 7, and Nissa goes away. The scary part, though, for Stráský is he's at 7 as himself, and he's facing lethal on the other side of the battlefield.
Yeah, but this is a huge turn here from Stráský. Got both of the Planeswalkers off the battlefield, and he's got a couple of chump blockers, and he's got a food in play just in case, right? Just to kind of pad his life total.
Gadwick for the win here. Now, not necessarily winning the game, but boy, oh boy, reloading that hand this turn, Stráský was able to basically dump his hand, and to great effect. He got rid of both Planeswalkers, one temporarily, one permanently. And look at his board state now. He is not under threat of immediate death. Could find himself in a position where he may be able to mount some type of comeback.
So this is a lethal attack. Stráský probably going to put one of the creatures in front of the Wicked Wolf. If he does that, he's going to go down to 1. Don't think he's going to double chump block here. Probably just going to be putting a creature in front of the wolf.
He found a Gilded Goose off of Once Upon a Time. Boy, he was looking for a Krasis or something there, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah.
But as it stands, he, like you said, he does have to throw something in the way. And since the Gilded Goose can provide long-term value by making food every turn, he's going to go ahead and keep it alive, chump block with one of the Paradise Druids. Now, this is Oko hitting the battlefield again here for Louis. But Stráský anticipated that. He knew it was coming. Stráský sitting at 1 life. You find another Gilded Goose?
I thought that was an Oko maybe off the top.
Oh, okay, okay.
No, maybe not.
Well, we'll find out shortly, won't we?
And Stráský still realizing that he has to get this Oko off the battlefield. He does have a chump block and some food to work with here, so probably going to be able to survive another turn.
Goose, goose.
Wow, okay, so that's a lot of geese.
It's also a lot of food, right? So Stráský is going to be able to survive this turn here, and now he's going to be at the mercy of the top of his library trying to find one of his really expensive spells.
I mean, he does have a lot more mana, and he does have a Castle Vantress in play to kind of help him dig, and the only thing Louis can do is just attack every turn and hope it gets there.
So Stráský's going to want to leave himself enough mana to activate Castle Vantress here and probably sacrifice some food. Oh, it looks like he's just going to sacrifice 2 food.
Right.
Well, he could throw a goose in front if he wanted, but
yeah, but he'd rather just make a food here and just gain a bunch of life.
Right. I'm just saying he could. It's just a matter of what does he want to do with getting through his library, and can he find a Hydroid Krasis or something along those lines here? Is it a Wicked Wolf?
Oh yeah, this is big.
Ooh.
This just continues to buy him time, and now I think Stráský's stabilized here. He has a ton of mana in play. He has a huge mana advantage to Louis, and I mean the Sultai deck doesn't really have a whole lot of reach, right? You can just try to make some 3/3s, but at this point, I mean Stráský with all the lands that he has available to him, he has the Gilded with all the mana that he has, he can just gain 6 life a turn and just kind of negate a lot of these attacks until he finds threats of his own, right? I mean, Louis can't even play a Nissa right now.
This is beautifully maneuvered here by Stráský. He has been hanging on by a thread for multiple turns, but he is very much back in this game. In fact, he's a little ahead at this point. Super well played by Ondřej. Seriously, I mean, he maneuvered through Nissa and Oko multiple times there, eventually leveraging his board state to take down both of the planeswalkers. And Deltour looks like he's looking at the board like, what happened here? How did I get to the point where I had Ondřej down to 1 with 2 planeswalkers and better creatures, and now I'm staring at a board state where both of my planeswalkers are gone and Ondřej's just ahead?
Yeah, no, Ondřej's navigated this game very, very well. Very, very aware of just exactly what he needs to do. You know, just pressuring the planeswalkers, knowing that, you know, Louis not going to have any burn spells in his deck, right? I can go to 1 as long as I just need to do everything that I can to just extract max value from all my cards, and he did. And that Gadwick did so much work. I mean, it drew him 5 cards, and that kind of one tech card that he had was big on top of the mass manipulation, too. That was a huge swing as well. Then now we're in a situation where Stráský has all the lands in the world, and because he didn't take lethal damage, now he can start digging with Castle Vantress. So now he's firmly ahead here. I mean, sure, the life total says 18-1, but he has so much effective life to work with, given the fact that he has the ability to generate so much food on the battlefield.
Yeah, you know, we talk about the concept of mana sinks, places to put your mana late in the game, and Ondřej clearly had that in mind with the Gilded Goose, sure, but also that inclusion of Castle Vantress. He's got 2 of those in his main deck, part of his mana base, as well as playing a lot of lands here. He has a ton of mana available to him in these games, and, you know, he has places to put it now.
Yeah, his list plays 1 more land than the typical list. He's playing 26 lands in his deck. Most decks play 24 or 25. And also, the fact that he's playing just a 2-color deck instead of a 3-color deck allows him to play a card like Castle Vantress, right? That's the upside of having a more steady, consistent mana base, is you can play powerful cards like Castle Vantress, where now that you're in the late game, you can really use that to really get ahead.
So Gadwick is actually going to get in the way of a food token which had attacked and trade off. The Wicked Wolf is going to get chump blocked in this scenario, but there's food production happening, and Castle Vantress activations will start to follow if Ondřej doesn't find something amazing here with his draw step. Let's see what he finds. He must have already known what that one was.
Oh.
He's attacking.
He's attacking Oko, which means that he will effectively just be eating that 3/3 token, 3/3 elk that's on the battlefield. Louis wants to preserve his planeswalkers.
And Stráský's just going to pass the turn back. Deltour still looking at the board state with a little bit of consternation here, like, what happened?
I mean, you know...
Ooh. Liliana Dreadhorde General in hand for Deltour. Now, he's a bit off from actually being able to cast it, but that's a nice one to have access to going forward. Stráský continuing to chump block the Wicked Wolf.
Yeah, but at this point, I mean, he's got to be bound to find some relevant threat here soon, right?
Yes,
he's scryed multiple times. He has 3 food in play, can gain a bunch of life, so probably going for a Castle Vantress here, and also gaining 3 life and sacrificing 1 of the food.
Land number 5 for Deltour before passing the turn back means that he's just 1 land away from being able to cast that Liliana. And Stráský continuing to generate food with his Gilded Geese, as well as use his Castle Vantress. 2 cards in hand now for Stráský.
Yeah, this allows him to kill the Oko with the Wicked Wolf because he has enough food. He would have to sack 3 food to do so. Wow. Do you see the card in Stráský's hand?
Oh my God, is it mass manipulation?
The question is, do you go for it here? Louis hasn't played a card in a really long time.
Yep.
Is that a Veil of Summer? That's got to be something that thinking about. If it is a Veil of Summer, how can I make it so that I don't die, right? If he does have a Veil of Summer. Do I have enough blockers? And he does. He does have the 2 Gilded Geese in play. So really curious to see if he goes for it here.
Oh, and he has an Oko of his own. So his last 2 draws were Oko and Mass Manipulation, and you're seeing the power of Castle Vantress here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's Noxious Grasp to take Oko out of the equation. And this is interesting because if Deltour finds an untapped land, he's just going to slam Liliana onto the battlefield, and Ondřej is going to be thrilled with that.
Yeah, he's going to be able to steal Louis' entire board.
Right, and as it turns out, that isn't the case. Deltour drew another copy of Noxious Grasp instead. But Stráský's been able to keep at least 1 food on the battlefield, so his Wicked Wolf has been safe from a card like Noxious Grasp thus far. Stráský, by the way, still at 1 life. He's been at virtually more life thanks to the food, but he actually hasn't used them to gain life thus far.
Only use if necessary.
Only crack glass in an emergency, says the food token.
1 is not an emergency. That's not lethal.
No. Yeah, Stráský's a cool customer. And now he's looking at the board. He's just going to start
Look at
jamming.
this. You're just attacking with, I mean, you know.
Can't blame him. It's a lot of damage. It doesn't look like he's in any threat of actually losing anytime soon.
Right. I mean, Louis' only hope here in his mind is probably just drawing land number 6 and trying to claw back into this with Liliana. But if he does, Stráský's going to steal everything.
That's exactly what happened. And now the shields are down for Louis Deltour.
Oh.
And Stráský's going to sit up in
Here
his
it is.
chair and go, how about I have that, and that? Thank you very much. Of course, he's going to activate Castle Vantress. And now the mind of a pro player is a very interesting thing. He says, look,
I'm going to steal everything
to kill you.
with the food.
Mm-hmm. He can steal the food plus, well, I guess the food gets sacked, but yeah, he can just get the job done. And Stráský showed it to him. Louis said, we'll do it then, right? Let's just get the job done here.
For the viewers, we want to see it. Cast the Mass Manipulation for
Dang
10.
right. Just
I
do
want
it for
to
all of
steal all of it. All of it.
Target these
Wow.
3 things, and Ondřej Stráský has enough to feed the
Just
wolf
enough.
and get the job done. What an impressive game there from Ondřej Stráský, finding his way. Remember, not only did that game go long, but Louis Deltour did the things he wanted to do. He had Oko, he had Nissa, he was rolling right along, and Stráský found the lines to make sure that he could leverage his on-board creatures to kill the planeswalkers. He didn't use spells to do it. He used spells to clear the way and then get those planeswalkers off the board over the course of like 3 turns.
Yeah, and you really saw just kind of the cards that Stráský chose to play in his deck that are slightly different than the Sultai decks really pay off, right?
Yes.
He was able to use Aether Gust as a tempo play. That Gadwick was extremely impressive.
MVP.
Extremely impressive. And then, of course, well, the real MVP.
Mass
Mass
manipulation.
manipulation. I mean, the thing that I think one of the pivotal turns that really turned it around was stealing that Nissa Who Shakes the World, because that swung the tempo firmly back in Ondřej's side, and then all of a sudden Louis was kind of playing a little bit of catch up, using additional resources to try to kind of get back into that game.
That's right. All right, well, back on our front table here, there's Oscar Christensen, and these players now have gone to their sideboards because we're in game 3 here. Eli Kassis finds himself up 2-0 here in the match, and Eli's sideboard looks a little like this. What do you like here, Paul?
So I'm gonna be bringing in the Noxious Grasp here. I don't think Sorcerer's Spyglass is especially effective. There's just too many ways for Christensen to basically deal with that. Veil of Summer is also a card that you can consider. It's a nice, cheap way to actually be able to protect your Edgewall Innkeepers. We saw how important that card was in this matchup. So I think I expect Eli to bring in Noxious Grasp and some number of Veil of Summer. Unclear how many.
And there's Oscar Christensen's sideboard here.
And he's got 2 copies of Liliana Dreadhorde Generals. He's already playing the 2 copies of Casualties of War, which is a 6-mana spell. Given that he knows about the Veil of Summer, I could see him just making the swap. I could see him go from the 2 Casualties of War, which were okay, but actually looked kind of slightly underwhelming there, and bring in the Liliana Dreadhorde General here to replace that card.
I mean, they're borderline a liability if your opponent has Veil of Summer, right? Like
Absolutely.
You tap out and they get to draw a card and spend 1 mana. You just don't want to be in that position.
Yeah, and the Golgari Adventure deck is also, the mana curve is a little bit lighter. You're not gonna. It's gonna be harder to find situations where they just tap out for you to to kind of leave the window open for casualties of war.
All right, turn 1 here for Oscar. He's got, you guessed it, Once Upon a Time. Taking a look at the cards in his right hand there as his options. Ooh, he's going to find a Wicked Wolf. Interesting. Generally speaking, you'll see players looking for a goose or a land with that to make sure that they're consistent. But it looks like Oscar just wanted to, either didn't find what he needed or just wanted to find some threat for down the line. But as you see, no Gilded Goose for him here. He's just going to pass turn back.
I think the value of Wicked Wolf goes up after sideboard because it's the more reliable way to kill Eli's creatures once you know that there's a chance he brings in Veil of Summer, right? Because Wicked Wolf is a removal effect that's green, so it actually gets to kind of dodge the hexproof and blue and black ability of that spell.
Speaking of Veil of Summer, that was the draw step there for Christensen, but his play, much more important, to get his mana on the battlefield as Paradise Druid. And then he's going to say go to Eli Kassis, who says, well, you get one, I get one. Land off the top of the library there for Christensen.
And playing a Wicked Wolf here, of course, is not going to be doing a whole lot, so I think he's going to just play out the breeding pool here, but actually this is going to be quite nice. He's going to run out an Oko. He's going to be able to make a food and still have access to Veil of Summer here on the Paradise Druid.
Jeez. Very strong.
Yeah,
Turn back.
and the Veil of Summer, I mean, they're going to be so good here, right? I mean, Eli, not only just, most of the food decks just have access to those 4 Noxious Grasps, but Eli Kassis after sideboard basically has 8 spot removal spells, and he's going to want all of them in this matchup. So to have that such a cheap, efficient answer, I mean, I think things are going to be looking a lot better for Oscar after sideboard, more so than it would for Eli.
Mm-hmm. Eli's just going to play out Temple of Malady here. This is the second one that he's played this game. A little bit of a slower start here from him. And of course we see no Edgewall Innkeepers or anything like that. He's going to put this card on the bottom of his library.
Yeah, and now, I mean, think about it. He's if he goes for it, he might do it on upkeep to tax Oscar's mana. But we've seen Eli play kind of this matchup before, and he does play with he's very patient with his removal spells, understanding that after sideboard you can't just fire off your Murderous Riders and Noxious Grasps right away if your opponents have access to that mana.
Perhaps hoping that Oscar Christensen gets a little impatient and runs out of Nissa this turn, leaving the shields down. That does not seem to be the case here, though. Look at this. Paradise Druid getting rowdy.
15.
And Kassis says, sure, I'll take it all.
And Oscar, he really just wanted to find more lands here, but I think he's just going to pass here. I mean, he's the one who has the pressure here, right?
Yeah. And Kassis knows exactly what's happening here. He says, I'm going to hit Oko with my Murderous Rider, but he normally would be putting it on the upper part of your screen here where it would be on its Adventure exile zone. And you see he just immediately reached for his graveyard, knowing that there was a strong possibility that Christensen had Veil of Summer, which he did.
Definitely.
And make no mistake, even him knowing it, it's still so good for Oscar. That was an entire turn from Kassis. The shorthand we use for that is he time walked him, right? He just said, you use up all of your mana for the turn, and I'll just use one little mana that I wasn't going to use anyway, and you get nothing out of it. And in fact, Oscar gets a card out of the deal. It is absurd how powerful Summer can be. And there's a negate there.
Wow, being able to pass and actually run out 2 spells that turn, huge for Oscar. He gets to untap, he gets an extra activation for Oko, and he's been able to deal with 2 of Eli's removal spells for his Planeswalker.
A little bit awkward on the mana here for Kassis as well, with the 2 temples and now the Castle Lochthwain also coming into play tapped. He's had a little bit of a rough go with that. For example, he has an Edgewall Innkeeper in his hand, just hasn't found a time to deploy it thus far.
So Oscar has a Wicked Wolf. He might just use it to get that Paradise Druid off the battlefield and then just continue applying pressure.
This is just a huge tempo swing all over the board here for Christensen. He has been able to stay ahead with Oko Thief of Crowns, and that's really one of the keys. I mean, you get ahead with Oko, and if you can protect Oko like we've seen Oscar do, the board state just gets out of hand so quickly. Every turn or every other turn, a 3-3 hitting sort of incidentally before you've even tapped a land just gets out of hand so quickly.
Another nice part about Oscar's board is Massacre Girl doesn't kill everything this time.
Doesn't.
It would just kill the Paradise Druid. You would get an extra trigger, but that would only give -2/-2 to everything. So if Eli's going to be maybe hoping to rely on something like that, he's going to have to play a creature that will die to the Massacre Girl to get enough triggers to kill everything.
Hey, he might be setting that up here because look at this. There is Edgewall Innkeeper, which is exactly the creature that you mentioned, and he's going to play Lovestruck Beast, and boy, he'd love to hit a land, but he didn't. He has Massacre Girl in hand. He could actually make that work. But he's going to need an untapped land next turn, and for the board to stay pretty much the same as it is now. Christensen, of course, very aware of Massacre Girl as an option for Kassis. He was joking about it in the game that Kassis got to really go off with Massacre Girl. Really just the best Massacre Girl ever, particularly given the stakes. And Christensen, of course, is going to be very aware of that as a possibility here as well, especially because the Edgewall Innkeeper showed up to turbo up the number of triggers to actually make it a true sweeper.
Yeah, that is certainly the card that Oscar is going to be aware of. It was so important in the first 2 games of this match.
So what can he do to help get in the way? Well, he's going to run out. Interesting. Okay. Vraska Golgari Queen is going to kill the 5/5 Lovestruck Beast, and Oscar's just kind of moving in here. He's just.
Is he going to turn Paradise Druid into a 3/3 or Edgewall Innkeeper into a 3/3?
He didn't.
Okay, because that would have been interesting, right?
I know, that actually is really clever, but he decided against it here. He is trying to slam the door on this game. He's basically saying, Eli, you have to have Massacre Girl next turn or I just win.
All right,
so this is
land.
Untapped land for Eli Kassis to try to get back into this game. Does he find it? It doesn't look like it.
No, I don't think so. It was a once upon a time.
Oh, so brutal here for Eli Kassis. He actually had a legit chance to get back into this thing. Now, he would have been behind still, make no mistake about it. But he would have had a 4/4 against an Oko and a Vraska on one, and maybe something could have happened. But as it stands, this is desperation once upon a time. I don't see how I can get out of this now.
Yeah, there's just too much pressure on Oscar's side of the battlefield now.
Oscar playing the tempo game, getting ahead on mana multiple times throughout the course of this game by using Negate and Veil of Summer to protect his board state and pressing his advantage as hard as possible here on the last turn, and it looks like that's going to pay off for him.
Yeah, even if Eli drew land number 5, I mean, keep in mind Oscar still would have had 2 Planeswalkers in play.
Yes.
A little awkward on the mana, but despite that, I mean, you know, of course, still very much in this game. It wasn't like the previous games where Eli just slams Massacre Girl and it felt like it was game over.
Mm-hmm. So he's going to go for Legion's End here.
And that's going to get both of the food tokens.
Yeah, it does get both of the food tokens, and he has a blocker back. So he is alive right now, although that should do it, right? He can just play the
goose, make the swap on Oko with the food, and then attack for lethal.
Or he can run out the wolf and just kill the innkeeper and then just attack with the other wolf. Oh, well, it looks like there is a human token off of Lovestruck Beast. So Heart's Desire does produce an additional blocker.
Huh.
Can he actually survive another turn here? Oscar would need an untapped land for Nissa. That would produce 2 lethal threats. So then he could trade a tapped creature for an untapped creature and win the game. So if he's got a land, he can just win.
I mean, the thing is, if he just goes Wicked Wolf here, kills a creature, and then attacks, that's going to eat the other creature, and then Massacre Girl is not even going to be a thing, right?
Right. I'm trying to figure out if he can win right now.
No, I do not believe.
Yeah, he needed a land.
Oh, no. He can eat something, and then he can swap, right?
Oh, just swap a tapped creature now. Sure. Oh.
Oh, no.
Well, he decided not to at any rate. But it doesn't look like it would matter.
Right. He could have swapped.
The tapped Paradise Druid, right? Or something. At any rate, whatever.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're just into the weeds here. But the point is that...
Creature for the token. Oh, yeah, and the tech with 2.
yeah, so that was funny. That was actually Eli saying what we were saying, which is, yeah, you could just send it over. But as it turned out that time, Oscar Christensen had built up such a dominating board position that he's finally able to break through here, and he wins his first game of this quarterfinal. So Oscar is fighting back. He's now 2-1 down against Eli Kassis. But you mentioned that you thought things got better for Oscar post-sideboard, and I can see why.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, geez, the Veil of Summer was a blowout, and the Negate wasn't bad either.
I mean, Veil of Summer on a Murderous Rider, right? You get to shut off the ability to even it just straight up puts it in the graveyard, right? Like you get to counter the creature for a potential card draw off the Edgewall Innkeeper, and you know it's one of those things. I mean, he likely is just going to bring in the full 3 copies. It looks like he also brought in Negate, so just aware that kind of his path to victory here is just making sure that he can protect his creatures, protect his planeswalkers with against those removal spells, and also just having answers for the Liliana Dreadhorde General, which also did a lot of work.
All right, let's get underway here on our back table. That's Louis Deltour versus Ondřej Stráský. Stráský winning a drawn-out Game 2 with his Simic Food deck versus the Sultai deck in the hands of Louis Deltour. Both players with mana ramp, though. It is Gilded Goose there for Stráský into Paradise Druid. You know where this can go. We could see turn 3 Nissa here. And Stráský actually has it, too, and doesn't seem to have a whole lot else going on. Do you just run it out? No, he's going to wait.
It looks like he's probably just going to go for a Once Upon a Time here. And maybe look to see if you can find a Hydroid Krasis or something instead. Also, it looks like he had a few more cards in hand.
Oh, they were still being filled out.
Right.
Okay, so the Once Upon a Time, sure, but it looks like it was the Ether Gust particularly that would lead him to say, I'm just going to be patient here. Now, though, he does have great options, right? Now he can play Once Upon a Time. It looks like he found a Wicked Wolf. He can now make a food as well. If he wants to use the goose. There he goes. And back to Stráský, who's just feeling no pressure here to try to get desperate and run out cards too soon. So now we're going to see Wicked Wolf. That is going to get hit with Disdainful Stroke.
Disdainful Stroke. Is that a one of? That is a one of.
Oof.
He's got 1 in the main, and he kept it in. And he got him.
But you can see that Stráský is playing carefully here and making sure that he leaves up his Ether Gust here so that he doesn't get Nissa'd. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Ondřej Stráský fire off Ether Gust here. And this is what we talked about before. This is the start to kind of breaking serve. Deltour still has some mana available, so it's not completely green light here for Stráský. But if he can land a big threat this turn, that's going to be huge for him.
Yeah, he can actually run out Nissa here, and if he has a land, he can go Nissa into 4/4 Hydroid Krasis, I believe.
He does have a land. It looks like he's got an island in his hand.
Now you can see the card in Louis' hand, which would be very powerful if Stráský did choose to just kind of tap out and run out all those planeswalkers, because he would be animating a land. He'd be losing a land, he would be losing a creature, and he would also be losing the planeswalker.
Another thing that Stráský has to keep in mind as well is that Louis Deltour is drawing Nissa, who shakes the world, for the turn, so Stráský is going to have to craft his game plan around that certain knowledge as well.
Yeah, this is a tough turn. A lot of different options for Stráský. Might be one of the most important turns of this game.
It does feel that way, doesn't it? And you can sense that, given that Stráský, this game had been played quite briskly by both players up to this point, and now Strasky's like, all right, let's really think this through.
Okay, so
it looks like he's going to go for the Krasis.
Yeah, just Krasis for 4 here, and then that'll still give him the chance of drawing something like a Veil of Summer, as he does have access to the 1 mana from the Goose.
He did not. He found a couple of lands, and he passes the turn back. So this could be the green light here for Louis Deltour to run out, well, whatever the heck he wants. Does he have 2 black mana sources
He's
currently?
counting his mana, but he can do it. He can actually go Nissa into casualties if he really wants. Stráský does have 1 mana up though, so maybe he's going to be concerned about Veil of Summer. So as you can see, instead he's actually choosing not to go for it here. Let's see, if he tapped the Goose, the Paradise Druid, the Swamp, and a Breeding Pool, runs out Nissa, you can tap the Overgrown Tomb and the Breeding Pool, and then untap the Overgrown Tomb, and that would give you 6 mana.
You're right, including the double black that he needs. But Deltour not going for it. I'm a little surprised because what is his... Like, if Stráský has Veil of Summer, he's not going to leave a window at any point for you to cast it. Like, you're trying to get it out of his hand and then cast it, or...
Which is why the question then becomes, like, are you even supposed to keep it in? Because these awkward situations get so awkward. If you keep it in, then do you need to commit to just casting it, especially in a situation like this where if Stráský untaps, you might just be in a lot of trouble here, right? Because he just cast the Krasis, he's way up on cards. You might need to just kind of go for the aggressive play here and just hope he doesn't have it.
Of course, the downside as well, if you're in Deltour's seat, is that he's not getting a Planeswalker with it, which is the most important target. So he also just may be thinking, well, I'd rather just wait until I have the targets that I want, and then I'll risk it.
Right. I mean, the casualties here are still going to be fantastic, right? I mean, it's going to be even better here. It gives Ondřej an additional turn to find a disruptive spell, but now you can kill Nissa, land, food, Hydrate Krasis with the casualties.
Yikes. And if that was Deltour's plan to say, well, I'm going to wait until I get maximum value, he will, because Stráský does not have a way to interact with it currently.
And Stráský just looking to see if he can line up attackers to kill Nissa, but he can't. But, you know, he can force a chump block or a trade with an attacking land, and then the Hydra Krasis will be guaranteed to get in for 4 points of damage on the Nissa.
So the trade is going to be the option here for Deltour. He's going to block, make a food, I guess.
That's what it looks like.
Another forest bites the dust here, though. We've seen that happening in the feature match area here, where Nissa's been waking up forest, but they've been getting into combat. Can be kind of rough. So big moment here for Louis Deltour. He's going to play out Fabled Passage. And there it is. Casualties of War targeting Nissa, Hydrate Krasis, Breeding Pool, and a food. And all Ondřej can do is make a food in response so that the food stays on the battlefield, but he's losing all the rest. A huge creature, a Planeswalker, and a land. And boy, it feels risky to leave Casualties of War in against a player who could have Veil of Summer. But my goodness sakes, when it goes off, it is devastating. That was a huge swing for Louis Deltour, and Ondřej Stráský is going to have to fight his way back into this thing. The good news for him is that he does have some tools to do so. He has Gadwick the Wizened in his hand, and he could cast that here for a decent amount. Now, it would have been a lot better with Nissa on the battlefield, where he could have drawn a huge amount of cards. But we did see in the last game that Gadwick was key to generating a huge amount of card advantage. 5 cards were drawn off it for Ondřej Stráský, and all of a sudden he was able to untap and get back into a game that he was quite far behind on. And that's what we're going to have to see here as well, because he's doing the same thing. 5 cards going into hand. This time, though, he's at 15 life. Now, he'll take a bit of a thumping next turn, but if he can untap with his newfound riches in hand and get himself back into it, it could be a repeat of what we saw in the prior game. The good news also for Stráský is that the last time he found himself in this spot, he was facing Nissa and Oko. This time, it's just Nissa. He's going to pass the turn back here to Deltour. And now he's got to survey the scene. As he drew his card for the turn, he just had a forest in hand. Now he has something else. And 2 lands are going to hit the red zone there. So this is kind of the thumping that Ondřej took when he decided to tap out for Gadwick last turn. But he's got a bunch of cards in hand now, including some good action, a pair of Wicked Wolves, a Hydreic Krasis, an Oko, and a couple of Forests. So this could very much be a repeat of what we saw last game, where Stráský found himself behind, but could get right back into it thanks to Gadwick drawing 5 cards last turn.
Yeah, Gadwick's just been a total MVP here.
And let's see what happens now. Because what he was able to do last time was leverage the board state that he found to get Nissa, and as it turned out last time, Oko off the battlefield. But as it stands now, he doesn't quite have that same board state. He only has 5 power total, and it's all on the ground. So he's going to need to do some work here. Wouldn't be shocked to see a Hydreic Krasis. Oh, he drew Mass Manipulation for the turn too, though.
Yeah, it's always such a risky proposition, though, right? It's, you know, if you go all in, tap all your mana, cast a Mass Manipulation, your opponent has the Veil of Summer, you go, okay, could I have played this game slightly differently here and not have lost to that card? So, and this time Stráský at a whopping 9 life, not 1.
Yes, not down to 1 after
a
that.
A little more to play with here.
Indeed. So he's going to start things off with Oko, Thief of Crowns, and let's see where we go from here. This is going to be really fascinating to see how Stráský navigates this, because I was very impressed with how he did in game number in the last game, and we'll see now how he decides to approach things. He's going to make a food, and I assume we're going to see a Wicked Wolf then. And he's going to start chipping away at the board state of Deltour. So he's got the potential to kill a breeding pool here, and that's exactly what he's going to do. Deltour's going to feign like he has something, but he really doesn't.
Yeah, Stráský just has to be extremely careful here. I'm sure he's running the numbers here.
And then he can send his 3/3 Gadwick into the red zone. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be enough to kill Nissa regardless.
But he wants to be able to potentially kill it in 2 chunks. By getting it down to 1, that means any future 3/3 that attacks can take that Nissa down. And given that Gadwick does have, of course, an additional ability, I know it doesn't probably need look like it needs more because it just draws you X cards. Whenever you cast a blue spell, you can tap things down. So even Gadwick by itself, if Louis, you know, tries to get aggressive here, take down Stráský's Planeswalker or even his life total, Stráský might be able to, you know, find a way to clear the way to get that Nissa off the battlefield, because that's really what he's trying to do. Louis at 18, and the name of the game in this matchup is, you know, get Planeswalkers off the battlefield.
So we're gonna go back. We're gonna see if we can go back to the point of mistake or leave as it.
Oh,
So
what do we miss?
After this triggered, this ability has been resolved.
I played Wicked Wolf, killed my Dream Pool, I drew, and I played Oko.
Antagonist as well.
Oh, yeah.
And the food was created by activating Oko.
Sure. Yes.
John, I'm gonna double check my.
Oh, I see what happened. So I think that Stráský cast Oko, Thief of Crowns, and then tapped down the Fabled Passage. But Gadwick says non-land permanent an opponent controls. And of course, Fabled Passage, even if it is a creature, is also a land.
Right, yeah.
Makes sense. I don't know. Like this is the last minute edition. I've never played it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So that
tough.
is big.
He's just got it as a one of in his list, and he's just like, I haven't really played this card that much. That's what Ondřej was explaining, but that does change things. What the judge will assess is if backing up to the point of the infraction is possible. because the most important thing, of course, is that the game state is preserved in the most authentic way possible.
Right.
But there are times where reversing a board state becomes impossible due to things that would have changed too much. So we'll have to see if they can do it.
Yeah, it looks like this is something that can be rewound, right? I mean, basically what's going to end up happening here potentially is, you know, Ondřej, it goes back to an infraction like you mentioned, and then Ondřej probably doesn't want to trade Gadwick for a 3/3 creature if it's on the battlefield. Maybe he'll just tap something else. Maybe it's a mistrigger. But what's going to ultimately end up happening if we go for a rewind is probably Nissa's going to go back up to 4 loyalty, and Gadwick will be untapped.
I don't think they could rewind it, Paul, because Deltour is taking his turn here.
Wow.
Yikes. So he's going to activate Nissa and fire up a swamp here, as well as elk up a food with Oko.
Yeah, and that's all really Louis
that's
can do.
unfortunate, though.
It's not gonna happen, big.
Attack Oko.
Deltour's trying to decide what to attack Oko with here.
Does he want to attack with Paradise Druid?
He's doing some math.
The thing is, Stráský doesn't have great blocks, right? All he can do here right now, he's tapped out, so he can just chump block with the Gilded Geese. So the Paradise Druid is also fairly free to attack here, but maybe he wants to keep it back on defense to preserve his Planeswalkers.
Especially Nissa.
He does have those 2 blockers, though, in the lands.
And it looks like Stráský just let Oko go because he's got the big hammer here, mass manipulation in his hand. This is what he was setting up. He wants these Planeswalkers around.
How impressive has this card been? It has been ridiculous in this matchup. It's like, oh, your over-the-top card is Casualties of War. You get to kill a couple things. I'm going to steal all your things.
Right. And, of course, that made it easy for Stráský to just say, sure, Oko's gone because I know I'm going to have an Oko anyway. It's just going to be yours. That's going to resolve here and probably put Louis Deltour out of the quarterfinals. Remember, Ondřej Stráský is up 2-1 here. If he wins this, he will advance to the semis. And there's no other word but devastating to describe mass manipulation. It is such a huge swing.
Yeah. Yeah, if that card resolves, I mean...
Like you said, we like it when it's like, hey, destroy 2 of your Planeswalkers. Wow, that's really good. It's like so much better than that.
And I mean, even just like the floor, right? Even when you just do it for 1, it's devastating, especially when you take one of those Planeswalkers, right? Taking a Nissa, taking an Oko, it just does so much work here. And now all of a sudden, we talk about having Planeswalkers on your side is the most important thing here. Well, Stráský stole both.
Yep. The irony, too, to Stráský's mistake earlier is that it cost Nissa loyalty, and somehow he ended up with Nissa, so it actually just would have been better for him.
This is lots and lots of mana, as we do have Nissa who shakes the world in play. It's probably looking like a Hydroid Crisis here.
He's going to go for a personal record here if it is, because this is going to be a massive Hydroid Crisis. And when this happens, this is a type of situation where Stráský is now ahead on effectively all metrics, right? All important metrics. He'll be ahead on board, and by a lot, by the way. And he's going to have a 10-10 Hydroid Crisis with 5 cards in hand. If you're sitting in Deltour, his deck is just not designed to come back from this type of deficit.
Okay. Last one, I cast the manipulation using these.
6 lines previous turn, we will know of 7. So
I cast the manipulation using these 8 permanents.
No, you used the good.
No,
One of good.
not. I had no food. 100% use this. You can check.
Yeah, he had 2 untapped Gilded Geese at one point. Maybe it was the turn before.
Yeah, I think he actually didn't have any food at that point, though.
I see.
We have to judge this.
The question, by the way, if you're watching at home and wondering what's going on, is has Ondřej played a land this turn? Now, he's saying, I haven't played a land because last turn I cast Mass Manipulation using the 3 blue producing lands plus the Paradise Druid and then the 4 forests, so therefore I haven't played a land yet because I had all of these in play last turn.
Right.
Deltour was thinking maybe that Ondřej used a Gilded Goose plus a food as one of those mana sources, but Ondřej is saying, I didn't actually have any food at the time.
I was activating it for them.
So maybe they'll just double check here. But honestly, this is a little bit of salt in the wound here for Deltour. It's, of course, worth it to double check and make sure everything's the way it should be. But Deltour's so far behind here, it's just going to prolong a loss.
Stráský's so far ahead here.
I mean, look at his hand.
He's got more permanents, more planeswalkers, more cards, more creatures. Oh, and there's also a little 10-10 flyer there.
Yeah. Just a little 10-10 Flampler all ready to roll.
It's like an art form now. Like, he has so many permanents in play. He's
Right.
trying to figure out where to put what.
Yeah.
What?
It looks like a Jackson Pollock painting here or something. It's just one of those splatter paintings. It's just permanents everywhere. Stráský's going to start getting in here. Sorry, what?
Did he tap anything with the Gadwick? Don't think he did.
With the Krasis?
Yeah. Oh.
And that's going to do it. Ondřej Stráský, with the dominating board position, is able to maneuver his way through both of those last 2 games. Ultimately, Gadwick the Wizened, his all-star, reloading his hand and giving him the fuel to go into the late game. And he finds himself in the semifinals, ending the great run by Louis Deltour. Congratulations, of course, to Louis for the top 8 here. A fantastic finish for him. It won't feel good in the moment, but getting a little distance from it, I'm sure he'll be quite proud of his accomplishment here. But ultimately, Ondřej Stráský moves on to the semis. And we mentioned it coming into the match there, Paul, that Ondřej particularly has so much on the line here.
Yeah, and you know, I had spoken with some of the, you know, Stráský's testing partners here, and you know, effectively they were just talking about how most of their cards are exactly the same. And even when you compare something like Aether Gust to Noxious Grasp, there are some instances where Aether Gust is better.
Yes.
Like, you can use it as a tempo play. When you use it on a Nissa that's on the stack, you know that they can't get a 3/3. So everything is almost the same, right? And then at that point, you start looking at some of, like, the mana base. You take less damage. You take roughly 2 to 4 less damage per game because you don't have 12 shocks. You only have 4 shock lands in your deck. And then you know, when I asked Stanislav Sivka what he thought about the matchup, he said, well, their top end card is Casualties of War. We've got Mass Manipulation. Games go long. You steal everything.
Right. Okay, we're underway here in our 4th game between Oscar Christensen and Eli Kassis. A friendly handshake to kick things off between the two as well. They've been having some fun banter back and forth and enjoying their time here in the top 8. Eli is on the play of this game. He led things off with just Foulmire Knight. Now he has Paradise Druid, but you critically see that Gilded Goose on turn 1 here from Oscar Christensen. Can he follow it up with Oko?
Oko, or I think a mana creature might even be better right now, because I'm not sure what he does have a Veil of Summer, but given that Veil of Summer now exists, it might be in your best interest to actually put yourself in a situation where you can play the Planeswalker and then also have the mana to protect it.
That makes sense.
This is the ideal start, I believe, for Oscar.
Now this gets interesting because now we see a tap out here from Eli Kassis, and it looks like he's going to try to stunt the mana development here from Christensen. Potentially he's going to play Vraska Golgari Queen, and he could just kill that Gilded Goose. That's what he's going to do.
And Oscar, do you want to get that value? Do you want to draw a card, counter this ability? I mean, you're not going to have a food.
Right, it does set him back on mana, at least temporarily, but he gets a card and gets to keep his Gilded Goose on the battlefield. It seems worth it, and he's going to go for it here. Especially, you know, it's interesting because he does have Nissa Who Shakes the World, but was he really just going to play Nissa Who Shakes the World onto the battlefield there? Maybe. if Eli taps out, you can kind of get away with it, right? You can untap a green source and have Veil of Summer available. So probably he would have, but either way he can't if the goose is either gone or the food gets eaten. And now a nice swing in Oscar Christensen's direction. He untaps and plays Wicked Wolf. Who needs food anyway? It's good enough to kill the Paradise Druid.
But Eli has a nice one here as well off the top. It looks like a Rankle, Master of Pranks. So if he slams that onto the battlefield, he can start chipping away at Oscar's life total. And does Oscar have one card left?
I think he has 2. I think he has Nissa Fabled Passage in hand.
Right.
It's 3.
Okay, it was just in a nice, neat stack. Looked like one card.
He's actually got, looks like 2 Nissas in a Fabled Passage.
So it could go for an attack here. Curious to see what Oscar chooses to do here. Either chump block on the goose or just take the damage. And then, of course, lots of different modes here on the Rankle.
Also interesting if he attacks with the Foulmire Knight here, indicating that perhaps he's interested in using the each player sacrifices a creature, because if you look, if the goose blocks the Foulmire Knight, of course Kassis is thrilled. That's just not an option. And if it blocks with the Wicked Wolf, he's also just thrilled. And if he's going to use the ability to sack a creature, he may as well get in for the 1 extra damage.
Yeah, and given that perhaps Oscar will just choose to take the damage from both.
Mm-hmm. 11? 4. 11 cards in your hand? 3.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see Kassis use that ability here. Because normally speaking, you'd prefer to leave the Foulmire Knight to keep the wolf at bay, given that there's no food on the battlefield currently. And it's unlikely that Oscar's going to want to use his Gilded Goose just to make food next turn. So let's see what Eli decides here. He can choose any number of those modes you see on Rankle.
Discard, draw,
Yeah.
sacrifice.
He's doing all 3. Let's go for it, he says. Discard Order of Midnight, and that gets a Nissa out of hand for Christensen. Draw a card, and then Christensen's going to have to decide what his priorities are. Ooh, Veil of Summer.
Probably the goose, right? Because next turn, he still has land. His last 2 cards are Fabled Passage, Nissa. So that's going to be a big turn for Oscar. He's going to go land, Nissa, animate, attack. He's going to have an attack for 6, meaning that he's going to be able to take out Vraska and deal 3 points of damage to Eli. Mm-hmm. On top of that, Eli's Edict effect or Sacrifice effect is going to be far less effective once Oscar, has an additional creature in play too. So this is going to be a really big turn.
Yeah, things are looking good for Oscar Christensen here. Of course, once he discarded Nissa Who Shakes the World, Eli's like, well, you probably got another one, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, it's basically almost 100% land Nissa.
Right. You see.
I'll ever get that instinct down. I don't think so. I'm just getting used to not saying fetch.
Okay, there's Nissa Who Shakes the World, a big play for Oscar Christensen. And as you mentioned, Paul, this gives him a lot of flexibility this turn on killing Vraska, Golgari Queen, and getting some damage rolling on Eli Kassis while having a Planeswalker on 6 loyalty.
It's a lot of different permanents that Eli needs to deal with here.
Yeah, first things first, boy, he would love to have an answer for Nissa straight away, but I got to tell you, Veil of Summer in hand for Oscar Christensen is brutal, because even if Eli find one of his many ways to just target Nissa Who Shakes the World with a spell that kills it, it wouldn't work anyway. So in a kind of twisted way, it's better that Eli doesn't have it, so he's not tempted to make that play. But he's going to have to settle with Rankle starting to apply pressure, but the way it matches up is just very awkward. It's going to take 3 turns of attacks unimpeded to get Nissa off the battlefield, and realistically, Eli's dead by that point.
Yeah, the problem is his only hope was to draw a removal spell. I mean, I know Oscar has a Veil, but his only hope was to draw a removal spell to get that Nissa off the battlefield. Otherwise, I mean, this is just too much, right? I mean, there's just so much pressure coming in right now.
Yes.
So he returned a Foulmire Knight. Oh, he's got 2 Foul Mire Knights.
And look at this. He says, you know what? I'm not going to waste my time. I can actually kill Oscar in those same 3 attacks.
Yeah.
If it connects 3 times, he can use the draw card, lose a life ability, and that actually is 10. So why bother? Let's race.
Discard and we each sacrifice.
He might wait a turn for the draw card effect because Oscar next turn is going to be able to untap with Nissa in play. And the worst possible thing is to let Oscar draw an additional card to find a Hydroid Krasis or a big threat next turn. And he only has to do it. He only has to use the draw card effect once, right? Because now that Oscar's at 7,
Yeah.
you hit him twice, and then at the final trigger is what you can use to get the last point of damage in.
Yeah, have a card and you're dead. So what did he go for here? He's abandoned the Liliana plan. Oh, he's actually going to use the sacrifice ability as well. So he's got that replacement Foul
That's all
Mire
he
Knight,
has.
and he is hanging on by a thread here because Oscar's going to be able to produce a lot of power on his turns. Very, very precarious position here for Eli Kassis.
So Oscar can attack for 9 next turn. Eli can block one of those creatures, take 6 and go down to 8. And we're just in a racing situation.
Yep, good old-fashioned race. Eli needs a lot to go right here. He needs to be able to connect twice without Oscar gaining any life, and he needs to be alive.
And Oscar realizes this is a racing situation. He's going to cycle the Veil of Summer to draw a card here because he really wants to play another threat here on top of the 3/3 that he's going to make with that Nissa.
I think he just drew a Wicked Wolf, and if that's the case,
That plays.
that is very, very good here, yeah. Even with no food, just using it as a removal spell is good enough.
4 mana, 3 damage. Probably getting the Rankle off the board.
Yep, and really smart by Oscar. I love the way that he's transitioned his game plan. It's tempting to just hang on to Veil of Summer, right? It's just you don't want to just cycle it against this deck, but he's recognized, look, you're out of cards. I know what your game plan is. You just discarded Liliana. You are not playing some long game. You're trying to kill me sooner than later. And also, I love just using the Wicked Wolf to get the Rankle off the battlefield. You know, after it's done, it looks very obvious. But again, there's temptation to say, well, I don't have a food. Maybe I should just wait. But no. Now he's effectively slammed the door on this game. And that's going to be game number 2, going to Oscar Christensen, playing it beautifully. I like the way both players did. They really adjusted to the situations. And Eli took what was admittedly a risky line, but it was his best chance to win the game for sure. Just didn't work out for him there. Oscar Christensen pivoting nicely and getting the job done.
And, I mean, the power of Veil of Summer so far after sideboard. I mean, in the previous game, it, of course, was just fantastic, right? Because it was countering removal effects. But also just here, I mean, it's got that flexibility. You're playing against a deck with black. You can just use it to cycle. You can just use it to draw cards. And, you know, when I asked many of the players coming into this tournament, it's like, hey, what did you do in terms of preparation for this event? It's like, well, I try to prepare to beat food, and I found decks that could do it game 1. But after sideboard, it was so difficult because of the existence of that 1-mana instant.
That's right. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a short break here. We've had quite a long, quarterfinals going. So we're going to take just a quick break here for a couple of minutes. But when we come back, the players should be ready to go, and we're going to get game 5 of our other quarterfinal. We'll be back right after this.
Hey everybody, I've got Tom Ross here to crack a pack of Throne of Eldraine, so let's get to it.
Yeah, why not?
All right, so what are you looking for when you open a pack here?
I think some of the good uncommons. My favorite card is to open is Order of Midnight. I like being black in the format, and I like being a card that can grind it out pretty well.
Order of Midnight, one of my favorite cards as well. As you're laying these out, let me know if anything kind of sticks out to you as something you might consider.
Oh, the Ardenville Tactician and Scorching Dragonfire, pretty high picks in my opinion.
Ooh, Castle Lochswain is our rare here. Bog Naughty, one of our uncommons, and Grumgully the Generous, along with Animating Fairy. What do you like?
I don't like blue too much. I don't like going the whole Witching Well deck. It's just kind of not my style. Grumgully is a card that I do like, but I don't want to commit to 2 colors at the moment. I will play Castle Lochswain if I can get it. I like being the black-green food deck, but probably don't want to get a Bog Naughty just yet. I'd commit to not too much and do the Dragonfire or the Tactician. I think I prefer white a little bit more. I think a lot of people don't like white. I I think at the Mythic Championship it might be a little bit more open, and also like black-white and green-white a lot. So yeah.
All right, so
Tactician's the one for me.
Ardenvale Tactician, tell me when you pick this card, what kind of deck are you hoping to build around it?
An adventure deck. Green-white adventure have like Edgewall Innkeeper, the Wandermare, the Mystical Pathlighter, something like that. Just a bunch of flying creatures. Flying is pretty important, I think, in the format. There's not that much of it, and there's a lot of ground creatures going on in like black-green and green-red. So yeah.
All right,
Also
solid
like
pick.
Knights.
You
Just
like
something
Knights?
else,
Yeah, have you ever drafted the black-red Knight deck or the Mardu Knight deck?
Sometimes. If I get the Lance in black-red it's okay. I don't like the black-red Knight too much. I like the other Knights. Like the black-white Knight I like quite a lot, and the black-green one.
So plenty of directions to potentially go here with this Ardenvale Tactician, which is going to be our pack 1, pick 1 out of this pack of Throne of Eldraine.
And welcome back to the feature match area here in Richmond, Virginia. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. I'm with Paul Cheon. It is our great pleasure to bring you coverage of the quarterfinals. This is our opening pair of quarterfinals. We've actually already finished one. Ondřej Stráský won 3-1 over Louis Deltour on our back table there. So Ondřej is your first semifinalist. And that brings us to the other half of our first quarters here. Oscar Christensen versus Eli Kassis. And yeah, baby, we're getting to game 5 here.
Yeah, Eli taking the first 2 games, and then Oscar coming out on top on the sideboarded games, with Veil of Summer basically being the MVP for him so far.
Yeah, you kind of outlined that when we came in to game 3, that you felt like Christensen would get a pretty significant bump, and boy, has it played out that way on the games. Veil of Summer just doing serious work against Eli's heavy removal deck. Are we going to see that turn 1 Edgewall Innkeeper? It does seem so, doesn't it?
Potentially a Lovestruck Beast. That could be
Yeah.
another consideration.
Play a little bit slower here. So it's Heart's Desire, which creates the 1/1 human token there for Kassis. He passes the turn back. And there's the Gilded Goose to kick things off. And we are in turn 2 Oko territory here for Oscar Christensen. He has Oko Thief of Crowns in hand as well as untapped mana, so he is good to go on that front. Love the chippy attack here from Kassis. Look at him.
There's like, what can you have? And that's what Oscar's going. I can't think of a card. Yeah.
Kassis is like, you got me. Oh, that was beautiful. We call that a free attack. It's a free roll, right? It's just like nothing bad can happen on Kassis' side. And I love the look on his face. He's like, yeah, fine. Christensen did give it a good think, though.
Right. Kind of use up a few of your opponent's brain cells, maybe. It's, wait a second, what does he have? And, great start here for Oscar as well. He's got the turn 1 Goose into the turn 2 Oko, and a Wicked Wolf in hand as well.
The downside, if you're in Oscar seat, is that, you are vulnerable here to any number of removal spells that Eli Kassis could have to kill Oko. As it stands, he doesn't have any of them. So Oscar can breathe a huge sigh of relief here. He gets to untap with Oko. You took a little bit of risk, right? He didn't have a Veil of Summer. He thought, well, I'll just do what I got to do here, and it's going to work out beautifully for him because now he got away with it. He gets to untap here, and he can play a Wicked Wolf.
Looks like he sideboarded in his own Massacre Girl, too.
Same with Liliana Dreadhorde General. He's doing a really good impression of Eli's deck here after board his top-end threats.
Yeah, I imagine he's going to use this Wicked Wolf now, get that Edgewall Innkeeper off the battlefield because this game is all about incremental card advantage. And so play the Wicked Wolf, kill the Innkeeper, and then the question becomes, what do you want to do with the Oko? Do you want to just turn the Lovestruck Beast into a 3/3 so that it's a little more manageable? Or do you just want to make a food? The problem with just making a food is that, sure, you can make the Wicked Wolf indestructible, but if Eli just has any removal spell whatsoever on the Wolf, he can then use the Lovestruck Beast to finish off the Oko and eat up Oscar's food, potentially.
Ooh, I don't like that.
Interesting.
So he's actually going to make the food into a
Okay.
3/3 play a land and pass. He has the mana to use Gilded Goose as well.
Okay, so playing it a little bit slower here, and basically saying, look, Eli, if you have an adventure creature, I will let you draw cards for one more turn.
And Kassis does have a Love-Struck Beast in hand.
I see. So Oscar, because he drew that Massacre Girl, I think is probably trying to set up for one next turn, potentially. Right?
Oh, he just wants to get all of it. And you see a chump block here from Oscar.
Have to keep that Oko in play.
Of course, and also wants to keep his Gilded Goose in play. Although, as it stands now, it's pretty easy.
Oh, yeah, and now the Massacre Girl is going to kill everything, right?
Yes.
Because it's going to kill the 2 tokens, the Edgewall Innkeeper and the Gilded Goose.
Holy
So it's going to kill everything, and Oscar is going to have, after this, a Massacre Girl and an Oko on the board versus an empty board.
Yes. This is huge for Oscar Christensen. Everything has
setup.
lined up beautifully for him. He needed Eli to not have critical removal spells on the last 2 turns, and he got there. Eli has a very clunky hand here with a pair of Liliana Dreadhorde Generals and some lands. So very clunky opener here for Kassis, and Oscar Christensen's line is lining up beautifully against the draw here from Eli.
Massacre Girl just doing so much work on both sides, right? It was crucial. It was pivotal for Eli for some of his victories in the early portions of this match. And now we're going to see Massacre Girl kill 2 5/5s, 2 1/1s, and an Edgewall Innkeeper.
And a goose.
Oh, and a goose.
The poor goose. What did it do, you know?
It was the sacrificial goose.
It even brought the Massacre Girl onto the battlefield, and you can see Eli go 2, and then another one, and then another one, and that's plenty enough to get rid of all the creatures. Massacre Girl once again wreaking havoc between these 2 players. It's just this time it's in favor of Oscar.
Yeah, and look at Eli's hand. He's got a couple of Lilianas. Really needs to find a relevant threat, and that was a land.
Yeah, he is just flooding out a little bit here with the 2 expensive cards in his hand and a bunch of lands. He's got Swamp, a couple of Temples, which he just played one of, and then the 2 Lilianas. He drew a Castle Lochthwain for the turn, too, so he just cannot find some interaction, and Oscar Christensen's taking full advantage.
Now, if Oscar does not follow this turn up with an additional creature, Eli could maybe try to slowly claw back in with the Liliana, but, you know, he's going to use a Liliana, -4, get 2 creatures off the battlefield. So that would be the start, right? That would be what he needed to kind of get this going. Now, is Oscar going to be aware of the fact that Liliana might be a thing next turn and just play an additional creature here, maybe a naked Wicked Wolf, no targets, just to apply maximum pressure?
And not lose his whole board.
Right, you would still get to keep either Massacre Girl or the Wicked Wolf in play.
He also has the option to Once Upon a Time here, but boy, if that doesn't go well for you, this could get out of hand. This is really interesting. Will Oscar pull the trigger here and just go for the Wicked Wolf?
The thing is, the really important thing about just playing the Wicked Wolf this turn is if Eli does play Liliana next turn, you have a creature left standing to kill the Liliana. So
it's huge. And he is. Oscar Christensen, very smart play here, eluding the temptation to try to get value from Wicked Wolf and just playing it as a hill giant. It's just a 3/3 for 4 here. And Kassis says, "Oh, why did you have to have that extra thing?" Because Liliana Dreadhorde General is going to do nice work here, minusing down to kill 2 of these creatures. But I'll tell you what, the difference between the board state with no creatures and this one is massive. Now Liliana's going to die. The good news, though, if you're in Kassis's seat, is that was the first of 2 Lilianas.
Right.
So he really is kind of forcing Christensen to keep up here. Massacre Girl finishes off Liliana Dreadhorde General, sends her to the graveyard.
But take a look at Christensen's hand. He has a Liliana as well. So even if Eli plays Liliana next turn, gets those 2 zombies off the battlefield, Oscar's just going to draw 2 cards. Yeah. He's got 2 Planeswalkers to Eli's 0, and Eli has no answers to either of them right now.
It's crazy that Eli has not been able to find any of his interaction with Planeswalkers thus far.
It's almost, you know, because Oscar boarded all these cards in. It's almost like Oscar went, Wow, those cards are really
Yeah,
effective for you.
I like
Game
what
one.
you're
I
doing.
was kind of jealous. These cards are pretty cool. I'm going to bring them in.
Another land off the top for Eli Kassis, and you can see this one's falling apart on him. It's starting to feel like there's no way back in. He's got Lovestruck Beast, Liliana Dreadhorde General, and a pile of lands in hand, and he's behind in every way. So we're going to see Liliana Dreadhorde General to stem the bleeding, but as you mentioned, this doesn't actually work the way that you'd hope it does. If he minuses, sure, he'll kill the zombie and a Massacre Girl.
Maybe
But
he's
then
just
he
going
would
to
just lose his Liliana the next turn, and Oscar would draw 2 cards off of it.
Yeah, maybe he's just going to tick up here instead. Just have a high loyalty Planeswalker and then also make a 1/1 token with that Lovestruck Beast in hand.
Okay.
And try to maybe get some chump blocks in and draw his way out of it.
That's what he did. He knows he needs a lot of help from this position. I mean, 17 loyalty on the side of Oscar Christensen's Planeswalkers.
Now, what Oscar really wants to do is find a creature. If you can find a cheap creature to play, he can then minus his Liliana, get both players to sacrifice both creatures, animate the food, attack, and get Eli's Liliana off the battlefield, right? You can attack with Massacre Girl plus a 3/3. So if he finds it, and he does, he finds it right here. He has a Gilded Goose. So he plays Gilded Goose, minuses Liliana, both players lose all their creatures, and then you can just kill Liliana.
Christensen plays Gilded Goose.
So probably, yeah, again, you want to sack the goose and the zombie here. Animate the food that does not have summoning sickness. And both players are going to draw off their Liliana statics.
So 2 cards each. Seems fair. That's
He's
the
like,
one
not
that's
that
sick.
one. That's
Yep.
the sick food.
And now he can safely, cleanly get Liliana off the battlefield. And just like the last 3 turns, it's just gone horribly for Eli Kassis. He even tried to avoid this situation by plussing Liliana, and it still didn't work.
Yeah. Really liked just Oscar identifying kind of just what he needs to do here to win, right? He's like, okay, look, I need to get that Liliana off the battlefield. This is how Eli can maybe come back in this game. So what do I need to do? I need to cast Once Upon a Time before I do anything. Try to find that cheap creature, because if I do, then I can kill that Liliana. And look at Eli's hand. I mean, 4 lands and a Foulmire Knight. There is that Lovestruck Beast that he has that's currently on an adventure, but just don't think this is going to be close to enough.
He's going to play Profane Insight here to draw a card, but this is really just desperation time for Eli Kassis. He's down to 10. He's actually facing lethal, isn't he?
Got 4, 7,
10.
10 damage.
All right, so he's got to put something on the battlefield just to even consider blocking here. And that's exactly what he's going to do. He's going to run out the Lovestruck Beast as well as the Foulmire Knight, then Temple of Malady, and take a look at the top card. I don't even know what it could be that he actually is excited about here. Looking
Looks
at
like
4 lands in hand, Paul.
Yeah, it's probably a removal spell, like a Planeswalker removal spell, maybe a Noxious Grasp or a Murderous Rider. Murderous Rider would be nice.
Yep.
You could kill Liliana and also have a 2/3 lifelinker to block. But Oscar's so far ahead at this point. Liliana truly impressive in this head-to-head.
Christensen looking at his hand here where he's got a Paradise Druid, a Wicked Wolf, and a pair of lands.
I mean, I think Christensen kind of sees that he's so close here. He's so close to finishing it off, coming back down 0-2, winning 3 straight in a row, all the sideboarded games. He's extremely ahead on board. He's got a Wicked Wolf in hand, and he just wants to make sure that he chooses the right targets here. He can get that knight off the battlefield, sack a food.
So he's going to do that. Trade a food for a Foulmire Knight while also getting a counter on his Wicked Wolf. And that leaves only one blocker back, the Lovestruck Beast. So the Menace on Massacre Girl allows Oscar to chip in for 4. And I say chip in, but that is 4 out of the 10 remaining life that Eli Kassis has. He is getting into that danger zone now. And it's not slowing down from Christensen's side. He's going to make an additional zombie and a food off of Oko. And pass a turn back. Yep. And with only lands in hand, and Eli knows what he has on top of his library, there simply was nothing he can do. And Oscar Christensen picks up the match 3-2. And as you mentioned, Paul, pretty incredibly winning 3 games in a row. You find yourself down 0-2, and you better hope your sideboard's really well set up for this matchup. And as it turns out, that was exactly the case here for Christensen.
Yeah, absolutely using every single option that he had available there, right?
Yeah.
Veil of Summer, very powerful. That Massacre Girl, I mean, that Massacre Girl in that last game took off 14 points of power or something like that on Eli's side of the battlefield. And then, of course, that Liliana on top of that. So, you know, I just felt like Oscar had a fantastic sideboard plan, and it really showed. It really showed.
It really did. And it powered him to the victory. So that does it for our first quarterfinal pair, but we've got more, of course, to bring you. So we've got Ondřej Stráský advancing to the semis, and now Oscar Christensen moving on to the semifinals as well. But we've got 2 more semifinal seats to bring you as well. Coming up in our other quarterfinals, we're going to have Andrew Cuneo versus Paulo Vitor da Rosa. Obviously, you're not going to want to miss that one. 2 MPLers fighting it out. And then we've got Austin Bursovic playing Sebastian Pozzo as well on the back one. So we've got a little bit of a break lined up for you here, then some interviews you're going to be hearing from the players, and then we're going to be getting right into the second set of quarterfinals. Thanks so much for coming along and joining us for coverage here at Mythic Championship VI. We'll be back right after this.